What's up, everybody? As promised, I said I'd go live tonight, and going to go over this in another kind of format. I'm going to go from top to bottom. Basically, nothing's up for debate. I've been seeing a lot of things out there that I see a lot of people who are weary, frustrated, but also there's a lot of people jumping ship right now, and it's the perfect time to jump ship for the people who are fake and phony. It's the worst time if someone's a good person and they want to contribute somewhere, but that's also part of being a warrior or part of being a drummer boy. There's a big difference. So I wanted to title this one, There's Nothing to Debate, because there is nothing to debate. At this point, August the 5th, 2025, nothing's up for debate. Not a thing. And then also, you can't compete where you don't compare. So, if that sounds braggadocious, then so be it. It just has to be at this point. Some of us know what's going on because some of us have been put in this position to know what's going on. Veterans are not better than people. We're not better. We're just different. But we're also supposed to be keeping our oath. All right, the oath is not just an oath. It's not just raise your right hand and repeat after me. It's none of that. All right, it goes in depth to our foundation, our founders, the ideologies, the legislation, and what the Declaration of Independence prescribed. Not just described, but also prescribed. And there's too many people right now who are regurgitating stuff. They can't tote the weight. They can't break the news because they aren't the news. They're not official capacity, anything. All right? And it's an operation. It's a military operation. As long as the laws read that way, it's exactly what it is. All right? So there's nothing up for debate, especially if you're a civilian. If you're a civilian and you have a following on your page, you need to stand down. It's that old saying, lead, follow, or get the hell out the way. But if you think you're leading, you better know what the commander's working with. All right, there's so many people out there, because we're in a social media world, who have blown up and they have platforms, but that's where you, the people, have to strengthen yourself to know what's real and what isn't real, but also who is and who ain't. Well, there's a lot of moving lips out there, a lot of them. But I can dang sure guarantee you there's nobody has done what I'm doing. But I'm not doing it for myself. I'm following every single law put into place by President Donald John Trump. And once upon a time, he told every single veteran, what did he say? He told every single veteran to do what? Remember your oath. Now, a lot of veterans don't know what's going on right now. That's unfortunate. But if you focus on the negative and what ain't, then you're always going to be what? Negative. If you'll focus on who is and who's giving you all the tools to be successful, then you can know what's going on right now. You don't have to be a veteran to be a patriot. But where a lot of people are hanging up is because this is a military operation. It's a military occupation. It's a continuity government. It's a government in exile. It was a puppet government. It's unconventional warfare. It's irregular warfare. If you don't know any of that, that's where your IQ and that's where your knowledge and whatever else you want to call it, that's where it's going to stop. That's where the buck stops, as the saying is. So you can't, there's nothing up for debate at this point. It's also not a competition. This isn't about destroying somebody. It's not about destroying a platform. It's not about destroying somebody who's misleading people. It's not about destroying them. So it's not about debating them. If they don't know anything about military operations, military regulations, military anything for that matter, plus continuity government, plus the presidential action documents, presidential emergency actions, if you don't know anything about that, you need to keep your mouth shut. It's not up for debate. And you also can't compete where you don't compare. So I can guarantee you ain't read, studied, or nearly had any of the experience that I have. Not only the experience, but also my family. You forget, too, that my family, you forget about my lineage and my family. You forget about my dad, my uncle, my grandfather, my great-uncles, my great-grandfather, the Civil War, the Revolutionary War. I'm a son of the Confederacy, and I'm a son of the Revolution. So you forget about the lineage. This isn't just me living through me. This is me doing what a veteran's supposed to do, knowing everything about military operations, military occupation, military strategies, military tactics, special operations. So anybody out there that's wanting to create a fuss or trying to be a debater, you should have been around 3 years ago, first off. Second, it's not about a debate, but especially if you're a civilian, sit your ass down and shut up. All right? So there we go. The end goal is not about my team won or I won, and it's not about that. This is not a Republican-Democrat thing. Unfortunately, because we have Republicans and Democrats, and it was, unfortunately, more on the Democrat side and the liberal side of the corruption and the evil, it has to be that for the time being. But the end goal is not about my team won or your team won. This is about humanity. This is about destroying the swamp. It's not about destroying each other. It's about destroying the swamp. Well, you got to know what the swamp looks like. And that's why so many people are jumping ship, because they wouldn't know a wolf in sheep's clothing if it was their own child. That's why it requires special skill sets by special people with the intellect and the IQ to know what's going on. And a lot of these people, again, are showing their colors because they're jumping ship because their IQ is stopped. Their level of awareness and their level of knowledge has reached a dead end. So it's not about destroying someone. It's not about debating someone. This is a military operation. And those of us who know what's going on and have been called back voluntarily or involuntarily at whatever capacity we've been called back at, we have that obligation, not you. And you wouldn't want to be called into a situation where you don't know what's going on or know what to do. You would definitely panic. Most Americans would. That's why I love the Marine Corps' commercial. The Marine Corps have the best commercial when everything's blowing up in the background and they say, we run to danger while everybody else is running away. A lot of keyboard warriors think they would run to danger. No, you wouldn't. Or most of you would have joined the military if you would have. Because military has been a voluntary service. It's been voluntary. Unfortunately, Vietnam, they did put the draft in. But other than that, it's been a voluntary service. My grandfather lied about his age to get into the war during World War II. So this is not about a competition, and it's not about a debate. And anybody trying to make it that, all they want are eyes, views, and they want to sell something. You can't compete where you don't compare. So the validation of the operation isn't here. People, I know what a lot of people are doing. The ones jumping ship is because President Trump hasn't said something yet, hasn't validated something more intricate. He has, you just don't know what you're looking at. But he hasn't come out and said, oh, that Derek Jonhson, that rattletrap, boy, he is pinpoint accurate. Because we're still in a continuity of government. We're still in a military operation. The law shows that. See, and that's why people jumping ship, is because they don't know the law. They don't know the law. They can't comprehend the law. They don't know how to apply the law. We've always had laws. We've always had orders. But there was a line drawn in the sand. On November the 8th, 2016, there was a line, just like all of us people in the military knows about the lines in the sands with any other kind of wars, but especially the wars in the 1800s where they drew a line in the sand. There was a line drawn in the sand. And it's up for you, the people, to see that line, and then that line will differentiate what the swamp looked like and then what President Trump and the operation is about. But until you do that, you're not going to understand that. And then until you do that, plus read the laws, plus comprehend the laws, plus read military, plus comprehend military operations, you're not going to get it until you do that. That's why you can't compete where you don't compare. All right? And ain't no civilian, especially no homeboy out there, ain't no civilian want to come at me. I can tell you right now, you don't want to come at me. All right? I have the resume. You don't want to come at this. You can't compete where you don't compare. You want views, and your IQ has hit a dead end. Nothing's new. There's no new people out there. If you see someone go viral tomorrow, there's nothing new. Everything you need is in current invoked laws and orders. They're unique laws and orders, though. See, people hear laws and orders so much, you forget the uniqueness part. You forget to apply their unique executive orders. They're unique, that outline, and also point to a presidential emergency action document, a continuity government, a special operation. You hear me say laws and orders so much that unless you go read those laws and orders and comprehend those laws and orders, then you can't apply it. You can't make applicable what you don't want to apply yourself. It requires initiative, and it requires a lot of reading. One of these National Defense Authorization Acts along the defense budget can be anywhere from 600 to 700, 800, 1,000 pages. That's just your defense budget. That's not an Army publication, and we have Army publications. We have Marine Corps publications, Naval publications, Air Force publications, Coast Guard. That's just your military. That's not executive orders after executive orders. That's also not all your past laws. So you can't compete where you don't compare. There's nothing new, and there's no new people out there. Everything that's been put in place, it's there. That's what President Trump's working with. So you need to stay away from those people and stay away from regurgitators. There's a bunch of people out there, a bunch of pretty ones out there trying to be pretty, and all they're doing is regurgitating. And a lot of people, you're falling for it because they sound new, they sound a lot more pleasant and all that. I sound the way I sound because I'm a retired veteran, and God put me here at that capacity to be able to serve beyond my service, and got an opportunity to get a badge and to do this. The level, though, of disrespect for the military is unprecedented. On both sides of the aisle, Republican and Democrat, the level of disrespect is unfreaking precedented. Now, you got people out there, you say your mom, your dad, your auntie, your uncle, your dad, whoever, stepdad, stepmom, son, daughter, cousin, whatever was in the military. That's one level and layer of respect. You got to have the bigger level and layer of respect. You got to want to seek to understand military operations, military strategies, military tactics, military customs, military regulations, military laws, how the military pairs with your federal. And then when you put all that together, you're going to be able to differentiate why President Donald John Trump is not operating as a normal president. It's not been a normal presidency. Nothing right now is in live time. Nothing's in live time. So if you want to escape the matrix, you want to escape the drama, the propaganda, all the lips and all the moving talking heads out there, you might want to listen to the few veterans that's talking about it. I'm sorry, there's not more veterans out there, but a lot of veterans know what's going on. They just don't want a name and a face. They don't want to get on here. There's a lot of veterans that knows what's going on here, logically, but are they articulate enough to say it on the podcast? No. And then they also don't want to be a name and a face on the podcast. So there's a lot of veterans that knows what's going on. There's plenty more out there. I know some of those generals and colonels that are there. Now, generals are a whole different category anyways. They've always been a participant of this. So every general that I know is for sure a participant of what's going on right now with President Donald John Trump, especially everyone that I know. Colonels, full-bird colonels, etc. I know quite a few that you have not seen on the podcast that knows exactly what's going on and are full-fledged behind this. But, again, they're operating where they're operating. So President Trump says all the time, laws and orders, laws and orders, laws and orders. We're a nation of laws and orders. We're a nation of laws. So why aren't you listening to President Trump? Why aren't you listening to him? He says this all the time. And as long as the law shows we're in a continuity government, then we're in a continuity government. So therefore, you got to know what? You got to know what a continuity government is, and what does that consist of? What does that entail? So again, you can't compete where you don't compare. Then you have the history quotes out there. History, it says what? If you don't study history, you're bound to what? Repeat it. Well, a lot of these people out there are wanting to repeat it because they're not wanting to know the history. They're just ignorantly going about it. And they're not wanting to know the history. They're not wanting to listen to a veteran that knows what's going on. But then not only listen to me, go read what I've given you. Go read it. As long as the law shows what it shows, then it's nothing else. The law was written as neutral as possible. The law is your foundation. It's as neutral as possible. Because if you get in a position one day, you might need the law on your side, but if you were all gung-ho, this hardcore over here for it, but then it actually didn't mean what you thought it meant, but you got in a bad position, and all of a sudden you needed that law, and you thought it meant this, but it actually meant this, then what? You, this person over here, yelling, screaming, kicking, cussing, whining, griping, fussing, moaning, groaning, all over here, all of a sudden, it didn't mean what you thought it meant all those years, but you need it, but you may look like the foolish one because you didn't know what it actually meant. And then you might what? You might need it. And then when you need it, then what? So that's why you don't want to look dumb. You don't want to look crazy. You don't want to look uneducated, unintelligent. You don't want to look any of those things. So what's that require? Reading, studying, comprehension. Reading, studying, comprehension. President Trump is not a normal president. By any stretch of the margin. Not. So let's do a timeline again. Catch up. June the 12th, 2015. The Law War Manual was reissued. They took multiple different law war manuals from different countries. They, meaning military lawyers and federal lawyers. They took multiple law war manuals from different countries, the strengths out of those. Then they took the Nuremberg trials, the Libya codes of 1863, the Geneva Convention, and one other, and put them together. They put all the strengths of those law war manuals and then these tribunals and all those things that took place, put them together and strengthened that. And put a new law war manual out 4 days before President Trump rolled down the escalator. And that's supposed to be a coincidence. February 2016, Obama said we're shutting down Guantanamo Bay. President Trump, same day, said no, we're not. And not only are we not shutting it down, but we're going to load it up with a lot of bad dudes. Tens of thousands. That's what he said. April and May. So April 2016. February, March, April. 2 months later. April. The Special Operations Command puts out a brand new unconventional warfare pocket guide. Guess who's taking that down from public view? Military. After who started bringing it to the table? Me. All right, now you can find it on another government site, but you got to know what you're looking for, which I have it pulled up here, and I'm going to read from it shortly. But the actual Special Operations Command, their publication, they've taken it down as of a couple months ago because of what you're about to see. All right. April 2016, Special Operations Command, which talks about government in exile, talks about assassinations being a special operation, certain things. It talks about all the different kinds of government in exile, shadow government, etc. All right. May 2016, out of nowhere, the United States Supreme Court, out of nowhere, Ginsburg, that crew, nothing to do with President Trump, all of Obama, all of Bush, Clinton, that Supreme Court, out of nowhere, April, May 2016, a month later, United States Supreme Court clarifying that military laws and courts are separate than federal laws and courts. Well, military, we've always known that. If you serve for the right reasons, we know military law is separate. The Uniform Code of Military Justice, the UCMJ, Title 10, Chapter 47. But you, the people, don't know that. Most of you didn't know that. So, what are they doing clarifying that military laws and courts are separate from federal laws and courts? Do you know where treason is tried? In military courts, not federal. November the 8th, 2016, President Trump. He didn't do that. He didn't do that on the first try as an outsider win the election. It's been a military operation from the start. Laws prove this. This is where, again, you have to have the IQ You have to have the initiative. You have to read, study, comprehend, apply. Too many don't do that, and that's why they're jumping ship too early. So let's get the ball rolling here. All right, so President Trump issued a number of executive orders straight out the gate, but there was one that you're seeing right now in the last couple weeks and the last couple months that's been really prevalent. He issued an order May the 15th, 2019, Executive Order 13873 about telecommunications. It has everything to do with mainstream media and media, news outlets, news reports, etc. All right. Now, some things you've seen are distractions. Some things were meant to be a distraction piece. Some things are. That's where you got to know military operation, military occupation, continuity of government. If you don't know those three components alone right there, but especially some unconventional warfare and irregular warfare, then the rest ain't going to make sense to you. Because there's certain war powers that a president has that's not applicable to a regular constitutional president. So he established this executive order straight out the gate, May 15, 2019, about telecommunications. And you're just now seeing the effects of that now in August and July of 2025. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But that's key to set up December the 20th, 2019. All right, so May 2019, the telecommunications. Now skip forward. December the 20th, 2019, very key, important date. You hear me talk about it all the time if you watch me. December the 20th, 2019, Space Force was established, one. All right, there was a few other acts that were very important that passed on that same day. And then also, Title 50, Chapter 33, Section 1550. Title 50 is War and National Defense. Chapter 33 is the War Powers Resolution Act of 1973. Section 1550 was not put in there until the Congress put it there. Title 50 is Congress and the Secretary of Defense. So when people say, like the liberals out there, they accuse President Trump of being a king and a dictator. Title 50 is that's not the executive branch that does that. That's the legislative branch. So that shows you right there. Plus, President Trump in 2019, there was a full what? A full Democratic-controlled what? House of Representatives. So what are they doing being the ones introducing this into being passed? See, Section 1550 is now in the War Powers Act for right now, but it also was in the National Defense Authorization Act of 2020, which is your defense budget. And there's a clause we're going to break down in a minute in the Section 1550. I'm going to get to that in a minute. There's a clause in there that shows this is operational, not a war declaration that's going to be permanent for other presidents to use. Meaning it's not going to remain in there. It's in there right now for record's sake under the War Powers Resolution for record's sake. For the declaration of what President's using, President Trump specifically, is using with all the military, reserves, National Guard, and active duty. But it was a what? It was Congressional. It was Article 1 who put it there, not Article 2. So it shows you what? Bipartisan. That clause specifically reads, and I'm going to read it again. I've done it before, but I'll read it again. Section 1550, reports and briefings on use of military force and support of partner forces. Not later than 180 days after December the 20th, 2019, and every 180 days thereafter, the President shall submit to the Congressional Defense Committees, the Committee on Foreign Relations of the Senate, and the Committee on Foreign Affairs of the House of Representatives a report on actions taken pursuant to the authorization for use of military force against those countries or organizations described in such law, as well as any actions taken to command, coordinate, participate in the movement of or accompany of the what? Regular and irregular military forces of any foreign country or government when such forces are engaged in hostilities or in situations where imminent involvement in hostilities is clearly indicated by the circumstances during the preceding 180-day period. regular or irregular forces. Irregular is where your special operations comes in. Irregular is your unconventional warfare, your irregular warfare, your clandestine operations, your covert operations. So some little pretty boy civilian out there who thinks that he's got a platform, if he ain't been in the military, he needs to sit his ass down and shut up and listen to military. So, again, there's nothing up for debate. If you're a civilian and you don't know military, nothing up for debate. Sit your butt down and shut the you-know-what up. Executive Order 13912. So it says right here, not later than 180 days after December the 20th. There's your first clause. So there was actions done in that first 180 days. And then it says every 180 days thereafter. Well, all of this is still open. It's still active. I'm going to show you how. All this, none of this has been revoked. It's not been rescinded. It's not been mission accomplished. Until it's revoked, rescinded, mission accomplished, it's still active. And there's enough proof to show that, quote unquote, Joe Biden was a puppet government. It was all a government in exile, which was done in the 1940s. So if you don't know military history as well and military operations of the past, you're also going to look like a dumb. See how that rhymed? All right. So you don't want to go. I'm telling you, you don't want to have a go at this. In the first 180 days, you heard all the chatter back then, if you'll remember, 2020, you heard all the chatter about President Trump doing what? Terminating the Constitution. Wrong terminology. It's suspending the writ of habeas corpus, which is Article 1, Section 9, Clause 2 of the United States Constitution. It's just called the suspension clause. The president can suspend the writ of habeas corpus, all right, which is invasion or rebellion of public safety. Which then, when you do that, that means you're going into a military operation, a military government, a military occupation, and continuity government, because that's one of the key components of a presidential emergency action document, which expands the powers of the president if and when needed. Established by whom? President Eisenhower. The continuity government and a presidential emergency action document go together. You don't have one without the other. They go together. And when you have evidence of those, then you have those. So you need to learn those and know what those are. We're still in a partial continuity government on August the 5th, 2025. We're still in one. By law, a partial, which means that not only has it been a priority, but it's winding down. So if you're a good person, you probably need to shut up. See, if you're a good person, you want to salvage your platforms out there, whoever you are. If you got numbers out there, if you're a good person, you probably want to shut up and listen to military, because I'm here to help you. I'm here to save you. All right? Might want to listen. In that first 180 days, there was talk by the mainstream media, which is a distraction. It got all the liberals chirping out there about termination. You don't terminate it. It's a suspension clause. It's in the United States Constitution. Again, Article 1, Section 9, Clause 2. So you need to go look that up. Read the Constitution. On March 23rd, there was an article in particular about President Trump installing a general. You don't install a general. So see, that was a disclosure, a soft disclosure, but it was also a distraction piece in another way, depending on how you read it. Depending on who you are and how you read the article, if you even saw the article. Most people didn't even see it, but it said termination, but it also said install a general. You don't install a general. They're there by rank. They've ranked up. They promoted up. You don't install a general. You don't have to install a general. You would command a general as the executive branch chief executive officer of the executive branch. You just say, hey, do this, Raising Cane. I want you to do this, Raising Cane. Do this. Do that, General Flynn. Do this, so-and-so. Do this. That's what a general's there for. He's under the commander-in-chief. So that was March 23rd. 4 days later, President Trump federalized 1 million reserve components to active duty. That order is still in place. It's not been revoked, hasn't been rescinded, not terminated, and also not mission accomplished. It's still active and open. That's how the military works. It's an executive order, though, meaning it's a presidential Title 10 order. Because in the Executive Order 13912, it tells you, Title 10, Section 12302. On March 30th, the whole world heard what they wanted to hear, and they didn't listen to President Trump. On March 30th, April the 4th or 5th, and April the 8th, somewhere there, he had press conferences. He said hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine. He never told you to take a vaccine by Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, Moderna, any of them. He said hydroxychloroquine, chloroquine. He was taking the Bethesda, Maryland, to a military base. Guess what military hospitals are? Separate from federal, separate from corporate, separate from the civilian sector. Military hospitals have our own what? Military personnel. All right? And he told the whole world, try hydroxychloroquine, chloroquine. Z-Pack if your heart can take it. Who didn't listen to him? About 78% of population from what the numbers show. All right, you didn't listen to the man. Now, he couldn't tell you what to do, and we couldn't tell you what not to do. He said, try this. Just give it a try. Because at any one point the president tells you to do something, then he's a dictator if it went wrong. If he don't tell you to do something and it goes wrong, people are going to blame him. That's not his role. That's not his duty. That's not his obligation. You have your body, your choice. And remember 2019, all the rallies out there? My body, my choice. Well, you got it. You got it. You made it. Now stick to it. And shut up, because we're tired of hearing about you out there. You made your choice. You made your decision. Now shut the you-know-what up and live your life. All right? You made that. You didn't listen when you were supposed to listen. You didn't stand your asses up when you were supposed to stand up, and you're getting everything that you asked for because you won't listen. You won't listen to people who know, and you want to be some mouth out there. The influencers want to be a mouth, want to be a face, want to be that, tote the news, break the news, but you don't even listen to the commander. So when you wonder why someone like me looks like I have an attitude, it's because I don't have sponsors, I don't have endorsements, I don't do this for any of that. I have what God gave me, keeping my oath as United States retired veteran. That's simple. I follow the oaths, and also I follow all the laws and the orders of my commander-in-chief of what he's put into place and what he's crossing the T's and dotting the I's to that you don't want to freaking read and go comprehend. Let me get my woosah moment in. Let me get me some octane right here. Let me get some octane in my system. He told the whole world. He told the whole world. The one time he mentioned Johnson & Johnson, what did he say? He said that they're working on a vaccine that won't be at a minimum 14 to 16 months out. What did Johnson & Johnson do in between the 14 to 16 months? They didn't listen to a command by whom? The commander-in-chief. And if you'll listen to President Trump, go back and listen to him. What did he say? He said on March 30th on one press conference, and the other one I think was April the 8th, but you can look it up. You can hear him clear as a bell. He said, listen to the terminology, we have administered to the United States government, the governors, hospitals, and doctors, we have administered to them hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine. Well, if he was operating as a real constitutional president, he wouldn't have had to say we're operating as this and then we distributed to whom? The United States government. He would have said it in a first-person form as the United States government has administered to them. He told you right out the gate, we're not in a regular constitutional presidency. We're a military government, military occupation, military operation, continuity government. And the laws already show this. Presidential emergency action documents are draft classified, but when you can see everything else around them, you can know that there are PEDs in place by President Donald John Trump that made him a wartime supreme commander, the same as Eisenhower was at a different capacity. It's because people haven't seen this because you haven't seen it before at this capacity. It's a unique, strategic, special operation. Executive Order 13919, April the 30th. Shortly after, President Trump gave a direct order to the Secretary of Defense to federalize the selective reserves to active duty. Which selective reserves are like 100, 200 at a time. But a lot can get done with a soldier. A lot can get done. A lot of people don't realize that. In the second 180 days of December the 20th, 2019, Title 50, Chapter 33, Section 1550, in the second 180 days, Executive Order 13961, December the 7th, 2020. Executive Order 13961 is also called the Federal Mission Resilience Strategy. That's the invocation of continuity government right there. In December 2023, skipping ahead really fast, in December 2023, there's a federal continuity directive put out. Continuity manager. Guess what's referenced all over it? December 2023. Who would have been the quote-unquote president to the world of sleepyheads out there that don't know the laws and orders? Quote-unquote Joe. Continuity manager. December 2023. Executive Order 13961. All over this continuity management. Federal Mission Resilience Strategy. Hasn't been revoked. Hasn't been rescinded. Hasn't been terminated. It's still active. 3 days later, Executive Order 13963. December the 10th, 2020 is the most recent and the last, or the last and most recent, however you want to hear it. It's the most recent order of succession within the Department of Defense. Every president, except for quote-unquote Joe Biden, has had an order of succession within the Department of Defense. In the Department of Defense directives, Department of Defense instructions, all those. Executive Order 13963. You got to know about the Department of Defense. The order of succession, if the president were to die, then that Secretary of Defense will be acting in its capacity under the Vice President of the major order of precedent, as when a president dies. On the bigger order of precedence, and then there's an order of succession within every department. So if the Secretary of Defense was killed and the president was killed, then it goes to the Vice President and then the person that they name up under the Secretary of Defense. Maybe the Deputy Secretary of Defense. It depends on it depends on their preference. Got to go read the order of successions. Also in December 2020, so following the footsteps here, December the 14th, right in there, when the electoral votes were supposed to be put in to get ready for January the 6th, President Trump, he's never lived in Texas, not one time. President Trump filed through the state of Texas, through the United States Supreme Court, against the 7 battleground states of 2020. So Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, Virginia, North Carolina, Georgia, and one other. Forgot who it is at the moment. Those 7 battleground states from 2020 were the same 7 battleground states of 2024. If you know anything about a battleground state before 2016, you would know they were always different because that's what the swamp did. The odds that the same 7 from 2020, from what people thought of the 2020 election, even though it was part of operation, were the same in 2024. And President Trump back here in December 2020 filed through the state of Texas, through the United States Supreme Court, against those. And what did he win in 2024? All those battleground states. Did you not see that? He posted those. That's the only states he posted on his pages about winning those. Keep jumping ship, morons. January the 1st, Federal Continuity Directive put out. Reconstitution of the executive branch. So see, 2017 to 2021 was all these unique laws and orders put into place that set up the continuity government, set up the Presidential Emergency Action Document. It was setting up what was about to take place from 2021 to 2025. What happened from 2021 to 2025 was set up in laws and orders from 2017 to 2021. January the 1st, Federal Continuity Directive put out under the Federal Continuity Directive 1 and Federal Continuity Directive 2 from January the 17th, 2017 and June 13th, 2017. Both of those also have military publications that pair with those, Joint Operation and Joint Planning Handbooks. The January the 17th military Operation Book was put out the same day as the Federal Continuity Directive 1. June 13, 2017, your Federal Continuity Directive 2, 3 days later, the military planning portion of it was put out. You call that a coincidence? And I'm crazy and you want to debate me? I don't think so. All right? So, January the 1st, Reconstitution of the executive branch, where they're telling you what's coming. Reconstitution means to put something back into its original state. So they're telling you the executive branch has never been in its original state for years. That's what Reconstitution means. In 2-3, in that publication, it talks about a new seat of government being established. You know what a seat of government is? The county seats. You hear county seats in your seat of government, which would be your capital in every state. And then the seat of government for the federal is Washington, D.C. In 2-3, it says, when the new seat of government cannot be established in Washington, D.C., Congress and their enumerated powers will get with the states to reestablish a new seat of government. Well, do you know about Philadelphia being the first capital? Do you know about do you know about what happened in 1792, the Coinage Act of 1792? You know what the silver, when silver was made, the actual coinage that we use? Do you know what they called that? They called that the seat of government. What did President Trump call April the 2nd this year, 2025? He called it what? Liberation Day? What are the odds that April the 2nd, 2025 was Liberation Day and it was all geared towards trade, which would be money, and the Coin Act was passed on April the 2nd, 1792, and it's called the seat of government? No, you don't want to debate me. You don't want none of this. I'm to the point that it's time to get in the boxing ring. All right? A disabled, 100% disabled veteran, but let's go. I'll get in the boxing ring with you in a wheelchair. It's no debate, no intellectual debate. If you don't know any of this, you don't want to debate me. I can go ahead and tell you right now, you don't want to debate me. It's time to get in the boxing ring with some of these people. January the 20th. Military regulations. This was their visuals to you. They were showing you all these visuals the whole time. History's already going to account for it. History's already going to account for that. These are proclamations and timestamps. For when you get down the road, when they do disclose that to you, you're going to be like, holy crap, I didn't know that at all. My gosh, that flew right. You can know it if you'll listen to someone saying that's Army regulations. It has nothing to do with you being a Buddhist or an atheist or a this, that. It has nothing to do with it. It's straight up regulations. That's why I say the level of disrespect for military is unprecedented right now. You want to argue about Army regulations, something you never were in? So on January the 20th, 2021, before you got there, you had January the 6th, which I've broken down before. I can break it down again, I guess. But January the 6th, the liberals hung on January 6th like a rat on a glue pad. What you witnessed January the 6th was Congress funneled down in an operation, but they were funneled down. They came to their dead end like some of these other deadheads out there thinking they're a podcaster and thinking they're an influencer. They came to their dead end where they broke federal law. So the first time in U.S. history you witnessed 2 objections take place in the state of Arizona. All right? And then they did what? They didn't stop the votes. They didn't come back in and say what happened with Arizona. They just went right from California to Wyoming. Certified quote-unquote Joe. Title 3, Section 15 of the Codification of the Constitution says that no votes are to be disposed of until the objections are disposed of. No votes, meaning don't move from California to Wyoming. Don't vote from here to here until those 2 objections are disposed of. They didn't dispose of those, as what the Constitution says. So the whole world witnessed Congress break Title 18, which is federal law, Title 18, Sections 2381, 2384, 2385. Most of those are seditious acts to overthrow the government. That's what you witnessed. It was a continuation of 2016 of their coup, what they call the coup. Now, a lot of that was theater, But at the same time, for the people who just can't wrap their minds around special operations, unconventional warfare, irregular warfare, then they still witnessed the breakage of that. So however you want to look at it, you still witness what you witness. So it don't matter what side of the fence you want to sit on, you still witness what you witness. Then you move forward to January the 20th. Right before that, President Trump had a speech. He told the whole world that what was going to be happening in the weeks moving forward. He never put a cap on it. He said in the weeks moving forward. He left it open on purpose like that. He said in the weeks moving forward, your great, 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 great grandchildren would live to talk about this day. Your great, 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 great grandchildren are going to talk about an old white man, 81 years old, that got 81 million votes and his whitey tighties sitting in his basement. That's another white man being elected? Come on. I mean, if that's what Joe Biden was, if Joe Biden got 81 million votes sitting in his whitey tighties in his basement, that wouldn't be no big deal. That wouldn't be nothing that my great, 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 great grandchildren are going to talk about. Not that part alone. It's the operation. It's the operation. And that's the level of disrespect that people are showing when they say out there they want to debate somebody, because your level of intelligence has hit a wall. It's because you hadn't read, you hadn't studied, you don't comprehend. And you're disrespectful of the military, you're disrespectful of veterans. I do this for not only the living veterans, but I do this for all those that we wear memorial bracelets for. So until you have a memorial bracelet on your arm or you got one on your mantle somewhere, shut the you-know-what up. New York, Texas, they showed you your visuals moving into your government in exile and then your puppet government. They showed you the visuals. New York, National Guard, reserve components in the subways, law enforcement. All right, they showed you straight out the gate military working with law enforcement. All right, so they showed you this. In Governor Hochul's executive order, and one of them's number 28, from New York executive order, number 28, it says federal support. Federal means Title 10, not Title 32. So all your cousins out there and your family members who say something about Title 32, if they don't know Title 10 or Title 32, or if they didn't look that up, Title 32 is not federal. That's state. Title 10 is federal. Title 10 is presidential. Title 10 is Uniform Code of Military Justice, presidential. Her executive order says federal support. You saw that in 2022 and 2023. Quote unquote, Joe Biden don't have a single Title 10 order in place for those military movements in New York or in Texas. Then in Texas, 2024. So skip ahead to Texas. You saw President Donald John Trump in Eagle Pass, Texas, and Del Rio, Texas. He's standing there with the governor of Texas and the adjutant general of Texas in one screen, and he told you twice it's a military operation. You saw him walk in a fob, okay? Most civilians can't even define the acronym FOB. You saw President Trump walk into FOB, and they did what? At ease. Right? You don't at ease a former commander. You don't at ease that. You don't stand at attention to a former commander. You don't stand there and hear him give you the command to carry on or relieve that. So you got to know these things. All throughout the time, you saw him going to races. He was standing at races on the track and in the booth. He was saluting. If you're a former president and you weren't in the military before, you can't salute. Becoming president doesn't exempt you to saluting the flag once you're done out of the presidency. That's very key. If he was doing that, let me tell you, the veterans that do know what's going on would be raising hell about that. Because that would have been a disgrace, per se. It would have been a mockery in another way. All right, and it could have just been straight up unetiquette. All right, not standard. So it wasn't. He wasn't a former president. You don't at ease a former commander. The adjutant general gave that whole picture away down there. The adjutant general, showed you all the reports for New York. It's the adjutant general with the reports. Then you got the governor in New York with the Title 10, the federal support, so that's straight up presidential. But the order was already put in a presidential emergency action document. That's why you can't see it yet. But there's other things that prove that. Some you can't absolutely prove with a PED, but there's stuff around it via laws and orders that prove the PED is in place. But you got to read those and comprehend those before you'll know that it's over here tucked away in a PED. So the Adjutant General gives away Texas because 14 states deployed to Texas. 14 states. Before President Trump was there and after him. 14 states. There's no Title 10 order in place except for March 27, 2020 and April 30th, 2020 by President Donald John Trump. See, that's why you got to know military. So if you're jumping ship right now, it's because you don't know military and you don't respect the military and you don't respect veterans who know what we're supposed to know. We're supposed to know this. The Adjutant General, this is a definition of a tag, the Adjutant General. That's like short for tag. That's what they call them, tag. But the Adjutant General reports to the state chief executive, which is the governor, unless what? Unless the National Guard are federalized by Title 10. If President Trump was not a wartime commander, he would have no business standing there with the governor and the Adjutant General. It would have just been the governor and the Adjutant General, and it really would have been Joe Biden if he was the real president. Because not only would that have been a violation of federal law and military law, that would have been a violation of President Trump's own executive order 13848 with the national emergency put into place September the 12th, 2018, because it was an election cycle. That would have been election interference. So there would have been 3 or 4 different major violations by federal and military law if President Trump was a former president. Standing there at the border in a military operation with the governor and the Adjutant General, and the Adjutant General's definition, his job, title, and role says he reports to the governor unless the National Guard are federalized by Title 10. And the only Title 10 order in place is from President Donald John Trump up to that date and that point for you to see that visual. Sam call sign. To this day, President Trump, when he gets on Air Force One, he don't have a Sam call sign, and he also doesn't have a presidential call sign. Quote unquote, Joe didn't have one. Now that's consistent. When I first came on the scene and I got put in this position, the Sam call sign has been on the Department of Defense aircraft. All right, so it wasn't exclusive to just quote unquote Joe. They're showing you that the Department of Defense, there's your order of succession again. The only order of succession is President Trump, still active to this day. The DOD are flying with the Sam call sign. Not anything presidential. That's another telltale. The E-4B Doomsday plane. Now, I got a buddy who was a contractor for the Doomsday plane. All right? When you have one aircraft up, if it's leaving Omaha and going to D.C., it's not so much high alert. But when there's more than one E-4B, which is a Doomsday plane, when there's more than one of those in the sky at any one time, that means serious business. They're not trained. I have up to 2, 3, and 4 Doomsday planes in the sky at one time on my files. I'm an air and missile defense. That was my MOS. So aircraft is what we study, what we know. All right, the different capabilities, what kind of aircraft they are, their weapon systems, their altitudes, etc., etc., etc. What their mission is, what they're supposed to be doing, what they can do, can they convert over, like a cargo plane, a cargo can convert to a passenger plane, etc. All right, 4 Doomsday planes at one time, and they were all flying together. This was 2 years ago. Meant there was some very serious nuclear business going on with the president and the Secretary of Defense, etc. And they kept that from you successfully the correct way. Because, again, most Americans are drama-filled, and you can't even handle a simple little tiny strand without losing your everlasting minds. So you definitely wouldn't be able to handle this, and you wouldn't need to, because if you can't handle it and you can't comprehend it, then you don't need to know about it. especially if it's going to stress you out, worry you. The people who know what's going on know that. That's why, again, to me, personally, 99.9% of podcasters out there that are not veterans and or haven't studied what's going on look atrocious. And you should be tried for sedition. Some of you should be tried for sedition and treason yourself, because some of you are misleading people on purpose. So the military occupation, what you've seen visuals, you've heard it, you've seen it. President Trump in multiple speeches. First off, there's no such thing as a midterm rally whatsoever. There's no such thing as that. All right, he had all these rallies in 2021, 2022, 2023. All of those. All right, you weren't paying for it, so what was? All right, so even if he was funding out of pocket, it doesn't really matter. But there's no such thing as a midterm rally whatsoever. At all these speeches, there were proclamations being made. And all along the way, you nudged a little closer, little closer, little closer, little closer. And you had to know those nuggets, and you had to listen for those certain terms in there to see where we were. And it nudged, and it nudged. That's why so many people are jumping ship, because you're not cut out to be a warrior. You're not cut out to be military. That's why you're a civilian. All right, you're not cut out for it. All right, you're not cut out for this certain specific, unique, strategic, special operation. Because the laws read the way they read. And there's plenty of visuals there to show you. All the way up to this point in this video, there's enough visuals already to show there's most certainly a strategic special operation via a military government, military occupation, and continuity of government in place. So President Trump mentioned all these terms. He mentioned occupied country, white flag of surrender, puppet government, and capitulation. Now, they were all brought in different ways. He's verbally said about the white flag of surrender. He's verbally mentioned the occupied territory, which he calls an occupied country. The media has been using capitulation and puppet government. February the 18th this year, there was a reporter asked President Trump about Russia, about a capitulation and a puppet government. I'm the only person out there out of all the millions of moving lips that's talked about puppet governments. Because my grandfather served during World War II when they used the puppet governments. So most every person, when you hear people out there, well, why aren't more veterans backing you? Why aren't more people supporting you? It doesn't matter who ain't, that's negative. But two, most of the people who would be qualified to talk about the puppet governments of World War II, they're all passed away. The ones that are living are 95 years old to 105 years old if they're living, and they're not at the capacity to talk about it. So thank God someone like me listened to my grandfather and absorbed that, took it all in, and remembered that. That's also why I have books in here in my library, books that are in the 17 and 1800s of the history of the U.S., written at that time period, the history. So they didn't have what we have right now. That's the history of the U.S. up to that point and the date in that book. So thank God certain people listened and had the, the patience and the intelligence to put it in a chronological order in a book to pass it down where guys like me will read and study it. So that's why people look atrocious right now. That's why they look like they got their head so far up their butt they can look out like a hoot owl and all bent out of shape, but they're looking out their own mouth, hooting, and looking dumb and atrocious. I can't make you read, I can't make you study, I can't make you comprehend, and I can't give you the experience, and I can't give you what my grandfathers and dad and uncle and great uncle, I can't give you what they gave me. It's all here, and thank God for that. Thank God for it, because somebody needs to know what the hell is going on. And it just so happens to be me, one of them. All right, so the white flag of surrender. Remember Angela Merkel? Remember Angela? No one remembers her right now. I gave her the white flag of surrender. It's the white flag of truce negotiations, which is found in the Law of War Manual. Occupied country, which is occupied territory, and puppet governments are in the same chapter of the Law of War Manual. You know what chapter that is? Military occupation. So President Trump and the media have been using terms from 2021 to present day that are not in federal government anywhere. They're in the Law of War Manual. And then one of the main chapters is a military occupation, which accompanies a continuity of government. You can't compete where you don't compare. Occupied country, puppet government, capitulations, white flag of surrender, white flag of truce negotiations. White flag of truce and the capitulations are in the same chapter of their own. There's no coincidence for that. That's why you got to know these things. Unconventional warfare definition is to overthrow an occupying power or a government. It's a resistance movement. That's also found in your Special Operations Command, which I'm going to read that really quick. I'm going to read you an excerpt here to show you what President Trump's working with. This is why you got to know your military history. It's why you got to know your United States history. The military was established first. The Army, more specifically, June the 14th, 1775. 16 days later, the very first military law. They called them war articles back then. 16 days later, June the 30th, 1775. Do you know that 1775 comes before July 1776? Come on now. Should be pretty simple. Do you know when the Constitution was written? September the 17th, 1787? Pretty sure 1775 came before 1787. So our military came before the Declaration of Independence, the first, what they call the first Constitution, your Articles of Confederation, your Constitution, your Federalist Papers, and then the enactment of the Constitution on March the 4th, 1789. Military came first. So it's not up for debate if the military can act without the government. And our special operations and multiple generals, multiple commanders, multiple people through the years know this, and listen what's in the Special Operations Command. I'm going to read it real quick. Most or all of the represented activities will be conducted by successful resistance or insurgency regardless of whether the United States government makes the policy decision to support it. The United States government support to resistance, unconventional warfare, is initiated by either a presidential finding or an executive order. Well, you have executive orders in place. So it shows the United States government did participate. It did support the military operation. That's why it was a Democrat House of Representatives with the NDAA of 2020, which is where the Section 1550 in the War Powers Act, Title 50, Chapter 33. I mean, you can't, it's not up for debate. It's there. So those jumping ship again lack the military understanding and comprehension of special operations and unconventional warfare. 2017 to 2021 set up the unique laws, unique, not normal executive orders, not normal laws invoked, unique, from 2017 to 2021, which set up, moving in, all those actions you saw, the invocation of continuity of government, Executive Order 13961, December the 7th, 2020, Executive Order 13963, December the 10th, 2020, which is your most recent, to August the 5th, 2025, your most recent order of succession within the Department of Defense. President Trump filing through the state of Texas via the United States SCOTUS, so your Supreme Court. Then, January the 1st, the Federal Continuity Directive about your reconstitution of the executive branch, meaning we're going to take it and put it back into its original state. Congress breaking federal law right in front of everybody, January the 6th, 2021. The funeral service for quote-unquote Joe Biden. They didn't get that wrong. The oldest unit in the United States Army. Well, we were just talking about dates. 1776, 1787. Guess what unit came before that? In the middle. The official presidential salute battery. They're known as the 3rd Infantry Regiment, the Old Guard. 1784. They didn't get that wrong. The first time in United States history, the first time in U.S. history, 2 different sets of cannons were shown on January the 20th. 2 different sets. The first time in United States history, the cannons were shown at Arlington on January the 20th. 3 cannons at Arlington is a funeral service by regulations. 4 cannons, 21 rounds fired, is a 21-gun salute by definition. Arlington National Cemetery tells you that. So if you want to piss on my grave, that's what my will shows. Arlington National Cemetery. You're going to have to find me through all those stones up there, but if you want to take a poop on my grave or piss on my grave when I die, that's where you'll look for me. All right? But go to the Arlington National Cemetery.mil website. The 3-volley salute seen or heard at Arlington is not to be confused with the 21-gun salute. The 3-volley salute is a funeral. It's not that difficult. The whole world witnessed, quote-unquote, Joe Biden and monarchy have a funeral service. There was not a commissioned officer present, even if it would have been the real official presidential salute battery. They weren't. None of them were official whatsoever. The official presidential salute battery, 3rd Infantry Regiment, oh God, they're so pristine. Go look them up on YouTube and watch them. Their movements, their actions, everything about them is pristine and perfect. That's all they do. They're mortarmen. They're not artillery. I went to artillery school. They're not artillery. They're mortarmen. This is all they do. Day in, day out. Week in, week out. That wasn't them. And the media told you that the official presidential salute battery was with President Trump at Joint Base Andrews with the 4 cannons, 21 rounds. That, by definition, is a 21-gun salute. That's your honorable salute. Quote-unquote Joe didn't have that. He had the 3 cannons shown at Arlington, which is a funeral, and there wasn't a commissioned officer present. That is a breaking, a violation of Army Regulations 600-25. Army Regulations. None of the National Guard saluted the motorcade. All right, we always salute a moving flag and a commander-in-chief. That's always. There's been so much stuff they've shown you. There wasn't a review of the troops. If you go back and watch President Trump again, both times, but if you watch him this time especially, there wasn't a. He had a review of the troops. Joe didn't have one. This is all unique to the military. Unique. Quote-unquote Joe, first time in U.S. history, didn't get a ride into D.C. on Air Force One. The guy who got 81 million votes sitting in his whitey-tighties in his basement don't even get to ride in Air Force One to D.C. Man, if you were a liberal, you should be losing your mind over all that stuff. That's the stuff you should be losing your mind over. The Air Force, the DOD, no recognition. You don't have to recognize when it's a military operation, military government, military occupation, continuity government. But you got to know those. 2021 and 2025, that's what you witnessed. All those movements, all those things you saw, like I just named off from December, which is in that 180-day clause and the second 180-day clause of your December the 20th, 2019, which is over in Title 50, Chapter 33, Section 1550. All those moved you into the 2021 to 2025, which was a puppet government, government in exile. What do you find over in the again, Special Operations Command? Right here. Look at that. Government in exile. Names it, shows you the definition of it, guerrilla force, shadow government, shows you all these things. It's all part of operations. And then you read that again where it says, once again, most or all of the represented activities will be conducted by successful resistance or insurgency regardless of the United States government makes the policy the decision to support it. But they did support it. That's exactly what Section 1550 is, and a few other things that you've seen that Congress had to do, not the executive branch. 2025 to present day so far, it's been court this, court that, appeals court this, district court that, Sixth Circuit this, Fourth Circuit that, judge this, judge that, judge block this, judge. The judicial branch. So 2017 to 2021 was a resetting of the legislative. 2021 to 2025 was a resetting of the executive branch. That publication on January 1st, the Reconstitution of the executive branch, that told you that. Here comes a resetting. Now you're watching the resetting of the judicial branch. The 3 branches of government. And guess what our founders did? They put them in that order on purpose. legislative, executive, judicial. Legislative branch writes the laws. Executive branch enforces the laws. Judicial branch interprets the laws. But they're only supposed to be up for interpretation if there's a discrepancy somewhere, somehow. But guess who these people work for? Us. We the people, as prescribed in what? The Declaration of Independence. That ain't what happened in the past 150 years after the Organic Acts of 1871 and 1878. That's not what happened. And it got worse and worse and worse, but that's not what happened. So it's a resetting of all that. They're not regular executive orders. Most of them are in presidential emergency action documents, and then there's some that I show you that are absolutely big and powerful. So President Trump on March, March 2025, up to that point when he said this, there were only 150 in the Federal Register and also on whitehouse.gov. Only 150 total proclamations, executive orders, and other actions. There were only 150. In March 2025, President Trump told you in a speech, I've signed over 400 executive actions so far. He wasn't talking about 2021 and prior. He wasn't talking about that. He said 400 from January the 20th, 2025 to March. It's not 400 there, which means they're in a what? The only other place they can be, a presidential emergency action document. And there's proof of that, even though they're draft classified. So now I'm going to break down 1550 again for those in the back. It says right here, codification, and it's in tiny letters. This is the stuff people don't read. Section was enacted as a part of the National Defense Authorization Act for the fiscal year of 2020, and not as a part of the War Powers Resolution, which comprises this chapter. It means that 1550 and the whole chapter 33, which if you click on it, it's got quite a few sections in it. It means this is not a section of amendment that's going to stay in the War Powers Resolution for future presidents. It means that that section 1550 and the actions of the military, the regular, irregular forces, and then what President Trump is reporting to the Congress, that is an operation. That's exactly what that's saying. So that also supports, again, it's a military government, military operation, military occupation, continuity of government. If you don't understand any of those, you're not going to understand any of it. All right? But that's what that's saying. Now you scroll to the very bottom of the page. It says executive documents. It says delegation of authority under Section 1285 of the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2020. Now this is where it gets fun. This is the cherry on the top right here, especially for those wanting to debate out there. You can't compete where you don't compare. Memorandum of President. Don't say memorandum of the President. It always reads this way. With any kind of memorandum, it reads this way. That's important. Memorandum of President of the United States, July 19th, 2021. So that would have been roughly a little over 5.5 months into quote-unquote Joe, what the world thought was quote-unquote Joe and the Ho. All right, Joe and the Ho. Memorandum for the Secretary of Defense. It says, by the authority vested in me as President by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, including Section 301 of Title III United States Code. Now, pause there. That line right there is in every executive document by any president when they put that in a section. It reads just that way. So that's not unique to the president putting that in. That is unique to that's just protocol. So it says, by the authority vested in me as president, not the president or the president, it says as president of the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, including Section 301 of Title III United States Code. That's always there, no matter who the person is. This is where it becomes unique to the action, to the order, or the prescription, what I want you to do. I hereby delegate to the Secretary of Defense, the authority and functions vested in the President of 1285 A through E on the use of military force in support of partner forces. Well, Section 1285A through E is Section 1550 because it tells you that in parentheses. I keep that out on purpose sometimes. So that right there is the first time any president has delegated the authority and functions to the Secretary of Defense of a president before them. Every other president who had a clause like this, when there has been one, it was telling the Secretary of State, not the Defense, told the Secretary of State to abide by the law put into place by them, maybe the year before or the 2 years before. This is the first time that a quote-unquote, what the world thought was a president, relinquished their authority and functions as a president and a commander-in-chief to the Secretary of Defense, the authority and functions vested in the president of Section 1550. Guess who that was? President Donald John Trump. Well, there comes your order of succession. That's why that's important. All right? The order of succession in place right now with all your Department of Defense directives, your Department of Defense instructions, everything is President Trump. Well, the president has to die in order for the Secretary of Defense to be in an active spot with the vice president, but in a dire emergency, right? Because that would have been an activation of the DOD. President Trump ain't dead. So what is quote-unquote Joe doing relinquishing his authority and power to the Secretary of Defense when the Secretary of Defense answers directly to who? President. And President Trump already has orders in place that invoke the continuity of government, which is a military occupation, already has orders in place directly to the Secretary of Defense that hasn't been revoked, revised, rescinded, terminated, accomplished. And the law shows we're still in a partial continuity of government. Therefore, all of your military government, military occupation, military operation, continuity of government, still active, still in place. And this right here was, quote-unquote, Joe, on paper, relinquishing the authority and functions. Now, your puppet governments that were active in the 1940s. The most popular with the U.S. was the Second Philippine Republic, where the president of the Philippines came to D.C. and was directly under Roosevelt. Roosevelt had full control of his military. Japan installed, there's that word, Japan installed a faux, F-A-U-X, a fake faux president in the Philippines. The press thought he was real, and a lot of the people thought he was the real president. He wasn't. He only had control of civil affairs with the Japanese. The real president was with Roosevelt in D.C., and President Roosevelt had control of the Filipino military. Now, that was a slightly different visual then. That's not what you saw with quote-unquote Joe. All right? You had to have a continuity, meaning that some people do know about the Federal Register. Some people do know where to look up laws, executive orders, etc. So you have visuals here that made all the average people keep bickering, whining, fussing, but Americans are resilient, so they're going to do what? If budget gets tight, you cut back where you have to. But there had to be a line drawn in the sand. That's what President Donald John Trump and the military did on November 8, 2016. Then you go in like you do when you buy a house. You start with a foundation. Make sure the foundation's stable. Clean out the foundation if you have to. Rebuild it if you have to. Then you work with your walls. All right? Your pillars, your posts, your 2x4s, your 4x4s. Then you work on that structure. The roof. All those things. So you start with your high priority and you work your way down. So when people say, why are people dying, Derek Jonhson? What are you doing about it? What are you doing about it? Why are you complaining to me? What are you doing about it? Not a dang thing. But whining, bickering, and fussing because you don't want to read, study, comprehend the bigger picture, what's going on, and it's a top-down operation. It had to be a top-down operation because so many Americans can't even name the three branches of government. 68% of 345 million people can't even name the three branches of government. So I know you don't want to debate with me. You don't want to debate with me. You don't want to talk to me. I will make you lose your platform if you want to go there, if it's an influencer. But all you other regular people out there, you can't even name the 3 branches of government. Just name them. Don't even tell who writes the law again. Just name the 3 branches of government. If you walked up to someone at random on the street, say, what are the 3 branches of government? Crickets. But what do you feel about President Trump? Let's say if it was a liberal. What do you feel about President? Oh, no. Can't even name the 3 branches of government. So they have no idea what's going on lawfully. And it's a military operation. It's to clean out everything. It's to clean out all this stuff right here. It's not a my team won, my team beat you. It's not that. It's not to destroy people. It's a military operation. So you have to have a what? Level of respect again for what? Military. Military operations. Veterans that do know what's going on. Stop worrying about what ain't and who don't know and all that stuff. Stop worrying about that. So that's the breakdown of 1550. Now, if you go over to the 1962 PDF, which would have been right after President Eisenhower and them established the Presidential Emergency Action Documents and the continuity of government, it tells you straight out the gate. Now, this is active to this day. This is still prevalent to this day. So I'm going to read it one more time. The committee has been briefed on and has inspected certain important features of the National Military Command System. The committee's concern with the system has been limited to its relation to plans for the continuity of civil government and for the survival and effective functioning of the presidency during and after a nuclear attack. In peacetime, the defense communication system, listen, including leased commercial facilities, provides 90% of the federal government's communications capability. Under the conditions of a nuclear attack on the U.S., there would be virtually complete reliance on the defense system. But straight out the gate, your federal government, your Congress, Senate, House, etc., all your departments rely 90% on defense, military communications, for their communications. You don't want to go with a military person. I can go ahead and tell you right now. So, PEDS. Why all of a sudden, from 2022, 2023 to 2024, and present day, and one of those is Republican, all right? Now, what they're doing, this is a double, you got to listen double here. They're doing 2 different things at one time. They're utilizing what the swamp put in place in 1973 with the War Powers Resolution of 73. They're utilizing that in its operational capacity there, but they're also going to change it after this is all said and done. So it's using the deep state's own words and literature against them and cleaning out the swamp with their language and their literature, but then they're going to turn that and they're going to put it to where, like the national emergencies, right now there's a 2-year clause on a national emergency, meaning when it's declared, it has 2 years for resolution, or it can be continued. Now I'm going to read what one of the senators says right here. This is the Republican that President Trump has endorsed. I'm going to read just a few lines here. This is June 9, 2023. Senator Mike Lee introduced the Article 1 Act, a bill that would reclaim significant legislative powers delegated to the executive branch by the National Emergencies Act of 1976. When Congress passed this act in 1976, it gave the President of the United States the ability to exercise unilateral power like a king. Now, there are more than 40 ongoing national emergencies that were never approved by Congress and have 0 expiration date. Now, you've heard me over and over talk about this, that it's not a national emergency after 2 years. When a national emergency has been continued for 40 years, 45 years, it's not a national emergency anymore. That's a money-making garb. That was a swamp with their deals, whatever they were making behind the table, their quote-unquote diplomacy, and them lying to you, and them gaslighting you. Well, the law reads this way, and you never went and did what? Read the law, study the law, comprehended the law because you thought a lawyer was supposed to do that? And I heard my whole life, well, that's what they get paid to do, sonny boy. It'll work itself out. Just let them do it. I've heard that my whole life. Did it work itself out? No, sure didn't, did it? It required a what? A military government, military operation, military occupation, and continuity of government. That's what it's required. You shouldn't want military in the civilian capacity. You shouldn't want it. But we're there because of this. All right. Now, what they're going to do, they're using all the literature by the deep state to use it against them and clean out the system. And then they're going to change that to where there'll be a 30-day clause, meaning in 30 days, if it don't have a resolution after declaration, they're also going to put in there that a president has to disclose that to the Congress, the Presidential Emergency Action Documents. So all of a sudden, these PEDs, Presidential Emergency Action Documents, that most people have never heard of in their life, that expands the power of the president, established by President Eisenhower, that accompanies the continuity of government, all of a sudden these PEDs that no one's ever heard about is a hot topic with the Senate. So that tells you President Donald John Trump is using what? PEDs. So I'm going to go through those again really quick and show you where they've been invoked. This is on your Brennan Center. Brennan was a Supreme Court justice who's gone now. This is the Brennan Center. They do all this research. All right, and they got a list of Presidential Emergency Action Document type stuff. Authorized detention of alien enemies and other dangerous persons within the United States. Straight out the gate, there's your alligator Alcatraz. There's your Texas border. There's your California border. There's all the quote-unquote riots in California. Straight out the gate, President Trump, Presidential Emergency Action Documents. Presidential Emergency Action Documents are this. They're proclamations, executive orders, national emergencies, and treaties. The four ways that military pairs with federal, so military law, military everything, there's four ways that military pairs with federal, meaning the military with the president, which would be operating what? Commander-in-chief capacity then with the military. He's president of the people, president of the government, and he's commander-in-chief of the military, and the military laws and your branches. Slightly different. There's four ways military pairs with federal. Those are your four ways. National emergencies, proclamations, treaties, and executive orders. Here's your Presidential Emergency Action Document right here, straight out the gate on checklist number 1. Authorized detention of alien enemies and other dangerous persons within the United States. And what did the Supreme Court have to rule on? This is crazy that a Supreme Court has to rule that a president can use a law that was put into place in the 1790s. I mean, this is how atrocious Americans have become. But they did it to put it on paper and also to have a backup that SCOTUS backs this as well. The Aliens Act. The Aliens Enemies Act. 1798. And what is this saying with the Presidential Emergency Action Document? Aliens, enemies, dangerous persons within the U.S. is a reason for a PED. Bingo. Suspended the writ of habeas corpus by presidential order. Well, what did we go over back in March 2020 about the President Trump to install a general in case there's a what? Breakdown of the law. And then 4 days later, he federalized 1 million reserve components to active duty. That's a suspension clause right there. Because all the actions that follow that show we went into a continuity government. You wouldn't need a continuity government if there wasn't a military occupation. Military occupation means a military government. It means you're not operating under constitutional standards. A continuity government means that the judicial branch, your courts, they're supposed to keep everything, your Congress, they're to do everything under a different slight variable. Provided for various forms of martial law. Well, a military occupation is martial law. You'll hear people out there, what are some things that presidents can do to invoke martial law? We're already in it. That's what a military occupation is. If you knew what a military occupation is, you wouldn't have to ask that question. Issued a general warrant permitting search and seizure of persons and property. Well, that's what they've been doing with all your unlawful migrants and all that stuff. They're able to go in on properties because of that. This all goes together. Establish military areas such as those created during World War II. What have I shown you all over my platforms? I've shown all our military and foreign military on municipal, regional, and county airports that have no reserve component attached to it, no National Guard attached to it, just a straight up regular county, municipal, and regional airport. That's a military area established by whom? The military. In order to do that, it would require a presidential emergency action document, which accompanies a what? Continuity government. Well, you have visuals of that if you know what you're looking at when I posted those aircraft on county, regional, and municipal airports without military components attached to them. You wouldn't have a foreign aircraft, especially a helicopter. There were India helicopters in New York in rural areas at county airports with no military. A helicopter, which means they had to be what? Transported here. They're not training. Suspension, production of the Federal Register. They've been using the Federal Register. Authorized censorship of news reports. You've been seeing that over and over and over and over again. So AP, the Associated Press, President Trump's put out 2 different posts about that 2 different times that the appeals court has upheld the banning of the AP at Mar-a-Lago and at the White House, which also includes presidential travel. The AP, the Associated Press, appeals court. He hammered CNN. They're now out of their building, their big building they had in Atlanta. They're in a small little area, small cubicles. He destroyed them. All right. NPR, professional bull riding. I got that on my mind. NPR, PBS. He just defunded them. Just a couple of days ago, it's hit the news that they've been defunded. He started hammering them way back here in 2024 and even before then. Those are telling me what was coming. This didn't just start up this week. So all that is what? Presidential Emergency Action Document. Authorized censorship of news reports. Well, guess what that ties to? What codification? 47 U.S. Code, Section 606. That, you know what it's titled? 47 United States Code, Section 606 is titled War Powers of the President. He can suspend, he can revoke, he can terminate wire communications, internet, TV, radio broadcasting, news reports. You have all your visuals. There's nothing up for debate. It's not up for debate. You can't compete where you don't compare. Some people just can't see the forest for the trees because you don't know what you're looking at, and you want to do good, but you got something in your way. It's called IQ and a brain, and a lot of little thing that accompanies that called initiative. So why does the law read what it reads? See, the law is written neutral. That's why I tell people, be careful what you stand for, because you may be yelling over here one day, and one day you may be over here, and you're going to want the law to do what? Apply to you. So you might want to know what? The law. You don't have to be a lawyer to know the law. And before the 1870s, you didn't have to be a lawyer to practice the law. As far as like law school, you didn't have to have a law degree. You just studied up under a lawyer, and he says, hey, you got the IQ, you're smart at this, you can comprehend this, you're great at this, you want to practice under me? Yep. You didn't have to, there wasn't no law school. There wasn't no school, no bar exam, nothing like that. Think about that. Look at attorneys. They go 4 years, right, studying the law. The first year is the worst, as everybody can tell you. First year. Then they get to the end of that, and you got to take a bar exam to prove that you just did 4 years of learning that. That don't even make sense. That's the dumbest thing ever. It's the same thing with any other college. You go 4 years, then at the end of it, they make you take a test to prove that you just did what you did. But whatever. You know, maybe it's to make sure you weed out the idiots, right? Weed out the ones who were doing what? Partying and cram studying and weren't there for, which you should want a doctor to do. So, okay, let's do that. So why does the law read what it reads? Why are we at a time in history where the law reads exactly what it reads, it outlines exactly what it outlines, and you have people wanting to debate a veteran who's not a veteran, civilians wanting to debate a veteran, don't know the law, don't know the orders, don't even know the visuals of those. Why are we at this point in history? How did we get to a place of such disrespect for military, for the commander-in-chief, for the laws and the orders of what he quotes all the time, laws and orders, we're a nation of laws and orders. How do we get to a place where you want to debate someone but you don't even know it? You can't compete where you don't compare. It's all here. It's all there. There's nothing up for debate. There's nothing. President Trump did this. I didn't do that. That's not my recommendation. I didn't add that to his ball cap. He wears this all the time. In punctuation, in literature, in grammar, a dash means 45 through 47, 45, 46, and 47. He put that there, guess what day? April the 2nd, 2023. There's that Liberation Day. There's that Coinage Act. There's that great day in history. Two different histories now, 1792 and 2025, the Liberation Day. April 2nd, it's a pretty key date with President Trump. He put that there. I didn't put that there. The other thing is this right here. This is part 1 and part 2 of my books. You can see the contrast of difference. Obviously, this is part 1, and that's part 2. This goes back over your history again. It goes back over military history. Your Declaration of Independence is in here. Your Articles of Confederation, where you can see the difference in literature in it between the Constitution. All right. This one is the pickup from December 2023 to January 20th, what happened that day. It's a pickup of that. All right. But I also dive into special operations, unconventional warfare, and also the visuals of that. A lot of visuals, a lot of different things that can help you with unconventional warfare, irregular warfare, special operations, military, getting to know the military, appreciating the military, respecting the military as a whole, intricate units, etc. That's what that is. Now, watch this. This is your Hunter Biden laptop report. This one, my book, is 596 pages. This is 636 pages. Both of these guys right here, they did this on their own. I think it's 2 or 3 of them off the top of their heads, but also with the laptop. My books are self-published, no ghostwriter. I wrote them all on my own. But I also, thank God, as a veteran, they're all what President Trump is using with his laws and orders. That's it. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing as a veteran. I'm sorry that other veterans aren't. But what you're seeing right now is a lot of hatred coming out. You're seeing people hating on Iran and Israel, especially Israel. There's a lot of true colors showing right now of people who are absolutely ignorant on Israel. What happened 60 years ago has nothing to do with right now in the present day. Everybody who's walking, living, breathing in the present, we only have the future ahead of us. The past, we got to learn from it, but we can't change the past. We can only prevent things in the future from happening. But all these people out there hating on Israel, it's true colors are showing, boy. Y'all got some true colors on Israel showing. Israel has been in our National Defense Authorization Act since 1961. President Trump hadn't started any wars. All these have been operations, strategic operations and airstrikes. Wiping out nuclear facility in Iran, all right? But Israel, the whole thing, one of my friends who was Jewish, they love for me to break this down. October the 7th to October the 14th, in 1 week's time. See, this is where people just want to be in the comment box and don't want to listen. In 1 week's time, Romania, Bulgaria, Thailand, Japan, Argentina, Colombia, Tunisia, Nigeria, all your European nations, all right, Germany, Sweden, Norway, Belgium, Hungary, United States, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, Russia, Ukraine, India, all these nations, Thailand, all these people were in Israel in 1 week's time. Military aircraft. In 1 week's time, all those nations I just listed were in Israel. Ukraine and Russia? Military in Israel? Humanitarian aid? See, and a lot of this has been delayed because in our Army reports, Army publications, way back in 2018, they put out that the Army was spending $572 million for our next missions will be underground, subterranean, underground facilities, not in megacities, but underneath them. 26 of 31 brigades of the combat brigades, 26 of 31. That was in 2018. That started hitting your military sites. Then you fast forward to 2019. In May 2019, Army publication from a war college, $572 million. There's a chapter in there that says Hamas, Egypt, Gaza, cross-border operations. The MFO.org, you need to go look them up, MFO.org. They've been in and out of Egypt, into Israel, into Gaza. Go read about the MFO.org. In and out, in and out, in and out. President Trump's Abraham Accords put into place in that second 180 days under that December the 2019, second 100 days, that Abraham Accords, peace in the Middle East. More countries are joining. Go look at the countries that made those peace deals. Go look at those. Go back, look at the capitulations from 2017 to 2020 where he was the first president to walk into North Korea. He was the first foreign leader of any kind in the forbidden city of China in 500 plus years. India, Modi praised him. Also supplied hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine during 2020. Saudi Arabia crowned him a king basically in the sword dance. All right. Then you had Japan. President Trump was the first person to hand the trophy to the sumo wrestler, not the emperor. And we can keep going. He pushed all those people out of the way at the NATO summit and all those things. Stood in front of the Queen, walked in front of the Queen, sat in certain chairs that no one had sat in before. He sat there and showed you the monarchy's dead. The swamp is being drained. And you got these people out there that don't even have a clue what's going on operational. October to November 2023. Within a month, they told you what? The war went to where? The tunnels. What's in the Special Operations Command over here? What's it say in here? Oh, what do we have here? Underground is a cellular organization within the resistance that has the ability to conduct operations in areas that are inaccessible to guerrillas, such as urban areas under the control of local security forces. It's all about underground. President Donald John Trump is the first president to implement a strategy for subterranean warfare, which is underground. That's all the wars have been around. The opioids crisis, the drug trafficking, the sex trafficking, the human trafficking, all these things that have been taking place. These P-8 Poseidons who have been flying over land, not over water where they normally operate. There's what they call submarine sniffers, the sniffers. They've been operating over land the last 5 and 6 years. Navy SEAL tells you on our podcast that I go on, Navy SEAL tells you that the P-8 Poseidon has the best communication system with the Navy SEALs in rivers, swamps, in very rural areas where the Navy SEALs operate in water. Where have these P-8 Poseidons been operating that I've been showing all over the last 5 and 6 years with my friends and family that knew about it before, but also publicly? Water in rural areas, not over the ocean where they typically operate. We also have a new device now. It looks like a drone submarine. So you can flood a tunnel out, throw that bad boy in there, and you can navigate that tunnel without putting men and women in there. You can see where that tunnel goes, and you can also flush out what's in there on the other side where the exit is. You got to think special operations, but you got to know special operations and think special operations. It requires a brain. It requires initiative. Israel, it's not what you think it is. And all these people out there hating on Israel is because they have no military skills mindset whatsoever. They have no initiative, but also they have no compassion for the future. None. They're operating on what they've Googled, which is not much at all. And also they found somebody that resonates with their hatred. That's not how military operates. Military is for liberation at all costs. That's what you've been watching. So you need to get out of your little worlds and get to the big world of what's going on humanity-wise with the military on the bigger picture. Iran was not a war. Did you see all of those people who claim that they're President Trump supporters, but especially some of the people that are on some of his lower level teams, like the prayer teams and all that? Did you see all those stupid pictures they put up? Not our war. Have you seen a war? Where's Kim Jong-un, by the way, from North Korea? Remember Hillary? Remember Obama and Hillary? Remember Pelosi? Remember Schumer and Schiff and all those people? Remember that nuclear war that President Trump was going to start with Kim Jong-un and North Korea? Where's he at? Where's the little fat boy? Is he soaking up all the Twinkies that RFK is going to take away? Is that what he's doing? Because he ain't been in the media nowhere. Where's Kim Jong-un? Where's he at? Where's the fat little joker at? Where is he? Where's the butt-cut fat boy at? I ain't seen him anywhere. Have you seen him? Where's this war that President Trump is going to start? Why are you people so unappreciative? Why are you people jumping ship? Have you not appreciated what he's done? Have you not witnessed that? It's a continuation. We're still in the dash. Where's the little fat boy at with his butt cut? Are they making a North Korean version of Beavis and Butthead? Is he going to be the star in that? Because he sure looks like he could be the North Korean squint-eyed version of the Butthead or Beavis, one of them. Where's he at? Where's this war that was supposed to be started with President Trump's temperament? Remember, his temperament's going to get us in a nuclear war. Where's it at? Where's the nuclear war? Not one war has he started. An operation and an airstrike is not a war. And see, all these people did what? They showed their colors because they want a name and a face and they wanted attention to their page. And then they got it, and there's been no war. There's been no retaliation by Iran. None. Because guess what Iran's in? Reports. We have reports of them in our what? NDAAs. And the last, so watch this. December the 20th, 2019. Remember that date? Section 1550 that started the wars? Remember that? Well, December the 20th, 2019 to December 23rd, 2024, there was not one single report on Iran to the Congress by, quote-unquote, Joe Biden. Not one single report by the quote-unquote president that the whole world thought was president. Not one single. Obama had 20 reports to the Congress on Iran. President Trump had 4 reports from 2017 to 2021 to the Congress. From 2019, December the 20th, the key date of 1550 in the War Powers Act, from that date to December 23rd, 2024, there was not one single quote-unquote report by quote-unquote Joe to the Congress. Now, you're going to have your smart alecks out there to say, oh, well, December 23rd, 2024, that was still him. No. President Trump made a key post out there. And then also, Kamala and all them made key comments. All the media made key comments. They said, where's Joe? He's disappeared. Where did Joe go? Remember that? Media made the proclamations. Kamala and all those people, quote-unquote Kamala, all these people made the proclamation. Well, then you revert back to your executive documents, which is law. Executive documents where, quote-unquote, Joe relinquished all his authority and power to the president of 1550, to the Secretary of Defense, and to the Congress. So you see, there's no loopholes whatsoever. But you got to know the laws and the orders, and then when you see that and know all those, there's no loopholes. Everything is tidied up in every position, everywhere. There's no loopholes whatsoever. So Iranian reports, very key. So you watched an airstrike take place in Iran, didn't you? Well, there's a key theme with all that we're going to get to in the next little comment I'm about to make here. But I'm going to do that right here. I'm going to make a little note because I'm on my way out here. All right. Obama? What separates this? So that's why your national security strategy is very important. And the Department of Defense. Quote unquote Joe has not one order of succession within the national security strategy and your order of succession with the Department of Defense. The last national security strategy on the Department of Defense website is 2017. Now, we're in a social media world. We're in a technology world. It doesn't take from 2022 to 2025 that long for anybody who's a coder or tech world to put up a little tiny emoji of the PDF file and a link that goes to the 2022. They show that quote-unquote Joe has a national security strategy, which is actually called a national defense strategy, in 2022. Why isn't it on the DOD's website? Why is the last, to this day, national security strategy put up on the DOD's website from 2017? The laws show you why, but you got to apply why that. Also, before we get to Obama, the Logan Act. This is another example of where you can't compete if you don't compare. The Logan Act, President Trump on the 2020 debate. He said it was you, Joe. It was you who recommended the what? The Logan Act to Obama to use on General Flynn. So that would have been Vice President recommending the Logan Act, which is a federal law, Title 18, Section 953, federal law, to the President to use on their Director of Defense Intelligence Agency. But quote-unquote Joe, as a president, couldn't use the Logan Act, the same Logan Act, Title 18, Section 953, on a former, quote-unquote, former President, Trump, for meeting with 12 foreign leaders 13 different times from April 2024 to December 2024. If President Trump was a former president, he just violated the Logan Act, which would also violate Executive Order 13848, which would be election interference, because that was a what? Election year. So there was two laws that would have been broken right in front of everybody if President Trump was a former president. He's not. Because the whole world would have not been able to do what? Especially the world of MAGA, the world of President Trump supporters, the world of Republicans, the world of conservatives. They couldn't have done what? Oh, no it wasn't. Yes it was. Trump Tower, Mar-a-Lago, are private establishments for the people who don't realize what they're in occupational capacity of right now. I know what they are, but if people don't, then they're private establishments. So why didn't the quote-unquote president, who was the vice president, who used the Logan Act against their defense intelligence, why couldn't the quote-unquote president, who knew about the Logan Act, use that on President Trump? You don't even have to talk about Epstein files to know that. They would invoke, by law, you wouldn't even have to invoke anything. If President Trump was in the Epstein files, if there is a file or a list or documents, whatever you want to call it, then they would have been able to open that up. So you don't even have to get in those arguments with people out there if you just simply know laws. 2021 to 2023, it was displayed to the public that quote-unquote Joe was the Democratic president. They had a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate. But he could not terminate one single tariff with presidential authority. First off, you don't need Congress. That is a presidential authority. You got to go look at the Trade Act of 1962 and the Trade Act of 1974. But it's all presidential. But even just for the sake of argument, he would have, quote-unquote, had support by whom? House and the Senate, because there was Democrat control. So from 2021 to 2023, but 2021 to 2025, Joe and the Ho couldn't terminate one single tariff. Not one single judge tried to block a tariff from 2021 to 2025. Not one single Obama appointed, Clinton appointed, Bush appointed, and Bush Sr. appointed. Not one single judge tried to block a tariff from 2021 to 2025. But you'll have liberals out there saying, oh, it's destroying the American economy. Oh, you dumb MAGA people, you're going to be paying for this out of pocket. Okay, well, if that were the case, then you got to explain why your dude didn't terminate one if he was really president. Laws show he wasn't. Special operations show he wasn't. World history show he wasn't. But you got to know all those in order to know that. In military laws, military orders, military regulations, military customs, executive orders, proclamations, national emergencies, and treaties are not conspiracy theories. So that's tossed out the window. Then you got 8 national emergencies in 8 executive orders that, quote-unquote, Joe did not terminate from President Trump. Those are key executive orders. Those 8 executive orders, here's just a few of them. One's taking back the Panama Canal that they called President Trump a dictator on. Just a few months ago, he was a dictator because he was taking back the Panama Canal, and he was calling out the Chinese. Well, why would they be calling him a dictator when, quote-unquote, Joe continued that executive order just to pass over to President Trump on January the 20th, 2025? Here's a big red bow. By the way, we're going to call you a dictator and all these bad names, but don't worry about it. Just here's your laws back. Deporting the migrants. You got your executive order with Nicaragua in there. Then you have your Doge. Doge is in that part. You had, quote-unquote, Joe, who did what? Put Doge in the what? American Family Rescue Plan Act of 2021. He funded Doge. If he was president, he funded Doge in an act of 2021 when they had a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate. That's even more hilarious. For the people who thinks it was real, a Democratic House, a Democratic Senate, and a Democratic president and a Democratic vice president did what? Funded Doge. The money's there. It's all there. So, you get to choose. I know what it is, but if you don't. Then you have your executive order of the national emergency for the telecommunications, which is the one that's banning all the Associated Press, banning CNN, banning MSNBC, banning PBS, banning NPR. That executive order from May 15, 2019. All these were continued to hand right back to President Trump. And then your election interference. That one really makes no sense. Really makes no sense. All right, so Executive Order 13848 is the one that actually shows you your presidential emergency action document is a fact, no debate, no arguing, nothing. Executive Order 13848 with a national emergency, election interference. It's the one that wipes out and cancels January the 6th because of the clause that's in it. It says no foreign power has altered the outcome or vote tabulation in any United States election, which is saying the deep state did it. It didn't say the foreign. You're seeing that with Russiagate. You're seeing that Putin didn't do anything. It wasn't him. It was Obama. It was Hillary. It was all your swamp. That's already been displayed to you. Now here's how you put it together. Russiagate. It was Obama, again, Hillary, the fake dossier, the Steele dossier, the fake dossier, and all these things with FISA and all these other things that's going to open up. All right, so there's that. President Trump put this executive order into place September the 12th, 2018. Now watch the timing of it. That's 2 months before any election under him. The first election under his presidency would have been November 2018. So this executive order with the national emergency was put into place 2 months before that. 2 years and 2 months before 2020. That clause in there, no foreign power has altered the outcome or vote tabulation. Outcome means overall. Vote tabulation, that terminology is January the 6th. January the 6th is when we tabulate our votes for the Electoral College. All right, so it negates January the 6th. And that will be in a P. Now watch how. This is very key before we get to Obama, because this is where the snowball starts rolling. This is where there's no debates. This is why you got no military. This is why you got to know military occupations, military operations, and your special operations, your unconventional warfare, irregular warfare, but presidential emergency action documents and what they do with the continuity of government. Executive Order 13848 was 2 months before any election. In November 2018, November 2020, November 2022, and November 2024, on National Guard military official sites, they will show you, and if you Google it, the AI version will tell you now, that the military were deployed to the polls on 2018 election, 2020, 2022, and 2024. Nowhere before in history have they been deployed for the polls. Not at this capacity whatsoever. The only way the military can be at polls are on federal official duty. Title 18, Section 592 tells you that the troops cannot be at the polls unless they're on official duty. There's a fine for that, because if a troop was out there in uniform trying to persuade you to vote, or try to coerce you to vote, or try to coerce you not to vote, or to push you away, or to detain you falsely, all right, and you thought, oh, they're official, I must be in trouble, and they did something not under official authority, then they're doing what? Violating federal law. That's why you got another law. So the National Guard were federalized for official duty. The National Guard.mil websites show you this. But guess what's not there? There's not a Title 10 order in place. Not one Title 10 order in place from January the 20th, 2017 to November 2018 for those military movements. That means there's only one location that a Title 10 presidential federalization order could be. Only one location. You sure you want to debate me out there? There's only one Title 10 area it could be. There's only one location it could be for that Title 10 order. Presidential Emergency Action Documents. That's why the Senate has all of a sudden, in 2022, 2023, 2024, have taken to amending the Presidential Emergency Action Documents and how they're reported. They want them reported to the Congress, because as of right now, PEDs are only between the President, the FBI, the DOJ, and a few key people, but especially the military, as of right now. The national emergencies have a 2-year clause on them, meaning they'll terminate in 2 years if they're not continued. Continuation requires pen, paper, president. So they also want to make it to where a national emergency has a 30-day clause on it, not 2-year. So that's the double operation. They're utilizing the operation as the law sets and set, but then they're going to change it whenever President Trump is done. That way no president can invoke anything, but especially a national emergency, and let it run for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. That was the violation of the law by the swamp. So they're using what's open as the clause by law, because you have to. You couldn't have any loopholes with this operation. But then they're going to change that after all this. But as of right now, what proves absolute proof, nothing for debate. If you don't understand it, don't comprehend it, then you don't need to be talking, moving your lips out there. This is a military operation, especially if you're a civilian. It's not saying you can't be smart, you can't know. But until you know all of this, this is exactly what's taking place. There's no Title 10 order and an executive order for those troops to be at the polls. The only place it could be then is in a Presidential Emergency Action Document. And you have full-fledged proof of your National Guard being at November 2018, November 2020, November 2022, and November 2024 elections. And the only way they can be there, this is what's prescribed in law in that Title 18, Section 592, is this. It says specifically tells you that they're there to repel armed enemies of the United States. The other thing about the National Guard is we operate with analog, not digital. We cannot be hacked. When we get the numbers, we got them. And President Trump told you, we have it all, we've caught them all. He told you that in 2020, but you got distracted, and that's okay if you're a normie. That's okay, you got distracted by the election. You thought that was all real and that it was quote-unquote stolen. No, it was operational. All right. Now, we're moving to the best part. Let me get this going here. So Hunter Biden, quote-unquote Hunter, all right, if you thought that that was really Hunter on July 21st, 2025 in this quote-unquote interview, it's not. But for the people who aren't up to speed yet, we'll play devil's advocate for a moment, just because. But it wasn't, and you can learn that through special operations and military operations, especially in part 2 of my book and all that other stuff. But that's just where you're going to get it in one chronological setting, in one order. But if you think that a crackhead can sit there and talk so articulate after all the crack that he's snorted, and he tells you he snorted it in every location possible, nah. But in this special operation, President Trump said he would be exonerated. He said, I will be exonerated. Well, that means not a blemish on his record. Not one single blemish. Well, I can't exonerate him. Republicans can't exonerate him. Conservatives can't exonerate him. Military can't exonerate him. Look at all the quote-unquote Republicans and conservatives or people who call themselves President Trump supporters who are already jumped ship on him, who don't have a clue what's going on lawfully. So none of these people can exonerate him. The generals can't exonerate him because liberals don't appreciate the military either. World leaders can't exonerate him because when someone does support President Trump, what do the liberals do? They lost their mind, they've been bought, they've been compromised. So the only people who can exonerate President Trump are who? The key players of the swamp. The criminals of the swamp. Hunter Biden's the first domino. Hunter Biden's the one that left all the traces of what? Joe, Obama, Hillary, Bill, Pelosi, Kerry, all of them. Mitt Romney, right here. So in this quote-unquote new interview that was all over mainstream media, in this new interview, old Hunter does what? So if you just want to believe he's real, fine. I'll go with that for a moment. Because he did what? He confirmed the laptop was real, and he confirmed that Rudy Giuliani was the one with a copy of it. Guess what's in the back of this book, 636 page? The tree that shows when the laptop went from Hunter to the guy who got this. He's left 2 laptops in his lifetime. But this version, and then it went from them to the FBI, and then Rudy Giuliani, and another fellow, a Costello fellow. Now, why would the FBI distribute that to Rudy Giuliani, of all people? Rudy Giuliani, remember all the Republicans and conservatives who even went after the great mayor of New York, of the tragic event that the Bushes rigged and set up? Why, look at all the people who destroyed Rudy. Why would the FBI and law enforcement give Rudy a copy? Wouldn't that be an obstruction of justice? Wouldn't that be an obstruction? If this wasn't an operation, if this wasn't a big plan, a blueprint, wouldn't that be an obstruction to get this to this group before it hits the fan? Wouldn't that be before it goes into the courts and you see it in visualization? Wouldn't that be the case? So that tells you what's already taken place. It tells you that courts have already been taking place in another kind of retrospect, because it's not a regular court. Treason, crimes against humanity, all that goes to a what? Military tribunal. Automatically. Automatic. Treason, crimes against humanity, military. So why would Rudy Giuliani get a copy of it? Guess who he gave it to? Marco Polo, who comprised this book. 636 pages of filth. They blot out the images. I do not recommend anyone under 16 years old looking at this, really under 21, because it's just filthy. They do blot it out. But this is all of your sex trafficking, human trafficking, child trafficking, all of it. All the links. It links Joe Biden to China. Remember President Trump calling him a Manchurian candidate? This shows in here the text messages, wire transfers, Zelle, Venmo, all of them. There's so many in there, I ain't never even heard of some of these things. Like, it shows all your checks, all the receipts. It shows all the phone calls, the phone logs. It shows all the emails. It shows everything. Everything's in here. All of it. It shows in the interview, they showed where Hunter said, oh, the worst day of my life was when my brother died. He was banging his wife within that week. Hunter was banging. I'm going to use that terminology just because you got to be colorful sometimes. Hunter was banging Bo's widow within a week. And it wasn't like intimate, romantic. It was filthy garbage. And then she turned on him. It's also in text messages. And he damned himself. He hung himself. In his text messages, he's the one that told on himself. And he was telling other family members that he was not able to see his 12-year-old niece because of what? Said their mother's afraid that I'm going to be doing what? What he'd already done before. It reads this way. He was watching porn and sitting naked with his 12-year-old niece watching porn while she was at his house and in his presence, and then also laying on his chest and also FaceTiming. So Bo's widow turned on him, and it's all in text message proof. Because what do you have? You have validation now on the interview that the laptop was real. Rudy Giuliani got a copy, and Rudy Giuliani gave it to this people. There's no way you have all this evidence. It ties in all your Ukraine stuff. It ties in all these different people. Boom. Ties them all in. Right here. Obama, Joe, Hillary, Bill, all of them. Mitt Romney, all of them. So now you get over to Obama. All right. On the War Powers Resolution Wikipedia page, all right, which I used to not like Wikipedia, but it's become a power source now. And then you have the fact that the founder of it is an Alabama graduate and also went to Auburn. He kind of fell off the wagon there, but whatever. But if you scroll down on Wikipedia, on the War Powers Resolution, one of the pages under it, there's a couple of them, but it'll tell you that in March 20, what year was that? 2011, March 21st, that Obama ordered an airstrike into Libya, and military and federal attorneys say that was a violation because Obama didn't have anything in the War Powers Act for that airstrike. Well, about a month and a half ago, I got banned briefly on True Social, came back within 10 minutes, had a red check and 1,000 more followers, so I don't know how that happened, but banned with a red check, came back, but the post I put up that got me was about Obama and a Supreme Court docket case that President Trump filed March the 19th, 2024, which Do your math. That's over a year ago now. So that means that it's not ready for disclosure yet. So for a moment, let's just take our hats off. And for those, is a moment of silence who just honed their careers. All these people who jumped ship. All these people who trash President Trump, who says nothing's happening. I don't see anything. Wants to debate me, but don't know anything about laws and orders. Definitely don't know anything about military. Don't know anything about being a veteran. Don't know anything about keeping an oath, having an oath. Don't know anything about that. Don't have a family lineage. Don't have anything. No conviction, no heart, no compassion. Don't know anything about humanity, crimes against humanity. Let's just tip our hats to all these people. Say, rest in peace to your pages out there. Rest in peace, especially influencers, because you've all jumped ship. You've abandoned the man who's in a special, unique, strategic operation. You have hurt yourself. You've damned yourself. You come to your own, not a crossroad. You came to a brick wall. The wall. You came to a wall. All right? And you can't cross it. You can't jump over it. And someone like me is not going to hurdle you over it, because you're showing your colors, and you don't need to be doing what? Leading people, because you've already misled people. Supreme Court docket case 23-939. So you already have attorneys telling you on a Wikipedia page, there's already documentation that Obama is not in the War Powers Resolution Act. So there's a problem. Because guess what Section 1550 is? That is President Trump's. Now, it's put there for right now. The codification says it won't be there in the future, but for right now, that's where it is. Because of what? Documentation, record's sake, proclamations, and law. It's a lawful order, it's a lawful operation, and it's a bipartisan operation. So now you have this documented on Obama, and now you have a Supreme Court docket case by President Donald John Trump, March 19th, 2024. 23-939. And in there it specifically asks the question, can a president order SEAL Team 6 to commit assassination on a political rival? It specifically tells you in there that combat generals, plural, senior level executive officers, plural, together, a resounding no. Well, guess the last person who was involved with SEAL Team 6 was at a presidential capacity? Obama. Obama and Biden. Guess who was in the room with them? The SEAL Team chief that I go on podcasts with. SEAL Team chief was in the room with them. Guess where Osama bin Laden was? He was in Pakistan. Osama bin Laden was taken out May the 2nd, 2011. Well, these military attorneys and federal attorneys are saying that Obama is not in the War Powers Act for Libya airstrike. Uh-oh. Well, guess what that ties into? Who was Obama's Secretary of State from 2009 to 2013? Hillary Rodham Clinton. Who was in a congressional hearing for Libya, Benghazi? Hillary Rodham Clinton. What took place in 2010? Uranium 1. President Trump said was the greatest scandal in United States history. Uranium 1. 2010. Guess who was smiling with Hillary in a photo? Putin. But guess what he was? A prime minister. He wasn't the president. What did President Trump just do recently, just this past week? He's been warning the former president of Russia. He's been warning him who's now on some kind of council in Russia, and then in one of his tweets, he said that he thinks he's still president. See, they're bringing all these people back to the surface from 2008 to 2015. 2014 was a real key year with Ukraine and then some other things. 2014, Obama had 4 executive orders, 3 in the month of March alone, for Ukraine. Joe Biden, Vice President, made 7 trips in 7 months on your taxpayer dollar to Ukraine. Mitt Romney, John Kerry, Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, children working in Ukraine, working for companies, gas and oil companies, Ukraine. Victoria Nuland worked for the Obama administration back then. She was displayed as quote-unquote Joe's undersecretary during 2021 and 2025. All these people, they brought to the surface again from that era. Victoria Nuland, 2014, secured $1 billion in defense budget for Ukraine. Biden, congressional hearing, congressional record. Biden said that they wouldn't get the $1 billion if a certain SOB, which was a prosecutor, wasn't what? Fired. He's on congressional hearing, congressional oath, and says what? It says specifically, you can look this up, they fired the SOB. They have one of 2 rounds of election, what they call a snap election, in 2014. All these things happened in 2014. But guess who was not the president of Russia from 2008 to 2012? Putin. Guess who was the president from 2008 to 2012? The one that President Trump is warning right now in the past week. Remember that February the 18th, 2025? Remember that? Remember that press conference I talked about with the capitulation and the puppet government for Russia? You know what a puppet government is? Puppet government, they use 2 presidents. What did President Trump just say about this guy? He still thinks he's what? President. He still thinks he's calling the shots. You know why? Do you know why Putin was grinning with a shit-eating grin on his face when he handed President Trump that soccer ball July 16, 2018? It's called a capitulation. Because he wasn't president from 2008 to 2012. He was prime minister. So he knew what was going on, but he wasn't the head man, wasn't the front man. Sir, whatever I got to do, you let me know. Here, I surrender. That's what a capitulation is. That's an unconditional surrender. Here you go. What do you want me to do? So President Trump got out of an intermediate nuclear forces treaty with Russia. This was also in 2018. The same year that Ukraine broke a Commonwealth treaty with Russia. They broke a treaty. Ukraine's not a member of NATO. So Article 5 of the Constitution of NATO says what? Any attack on one NATO nation is an attack on all. How come these nations didn't support Ukraine? Because they're not a part of NATO. All right, but some were doing that, but they're not a part of NATO. Why was quote-unquote Joe quoting Article 5 of the NATO Constitution when Ukraine is not a part of NATO? Because that's not what's going on in Ukraine. It's very well known that the Department of Defense of the United States under Bush, starting with Bush, could probably make an argument with Clinton because it probably rolled into that, but they know for a fact that Bush and the U.S. DOD was funding biolabs in Ukraine. Confirmation. Russia went into Ukraine and has taken out those biolabs. Now that was going to be ugly because of nuclear facilities and things of that nature. That wasn't going to be pretty at all. All right, the destruction of those. But you had Anthony Blinken, who was in a bar in Russia playing Keep On Rocking in the Free World with a Gibson Les Paul. All right, so this shows you, they've been showing you this stuff's not real. It's real if you want to believe that, but it's not real if you know a veteran who knows the laws, who knows the orders, who knows military operations, military occupation, continuity of government, knows all the terminology. It's not. It's whatever you want to believe, but if you want to keep on with the drama, the propaganda and the drama and all that bullcrap, go on for it. But get off my page and quit clogging the comment box up on my page. All right? But you're misleading people if you're using drama and propaganda, because it's not that. It's not that at all. The laws show this. When President Trump left that Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, if you go read about that, it actually supports the MAD doctrine, Mutually Assured Destruction, which is actually Nash equilibrium, which means peace. It don't mean what you think it means. You think leaving a treaty would actually be, oh, that's not good. No, go read what leaving this treaty meant. It was a MAD doctrine, Mutually Assured Destruction, and then also Nash equilibrium, which means peace. It doesn't mean the polar opposite of what you thought it would mean. President Trump did that in 2018. Then in 2022, they reestablished a new date with the Ukrainian quote-unquote war. All right, because when history accounts for it, you're going to see that quote-unquote Joe was not real. It was all an occupation, continuity of government, puppet government, government exile. All right, so when that accounts for it, you're going to remember me. Whether I'm dead or alive, you're going to know. If you're alive and I'm dead, you're going to know. Well, dang, he was 100% correct. Because it's an operation. Laws and orders show this, but you got to know the laws and orders in order to know what you're looking at and the operations and the visuals of those. So now, come back to Obama. So see, Uranium 1 ties in because who was the president? Obama was the president. Uranium 1 was between Hillary and Bill and Russia. $145 million. Bill Clinton was getting $500,000 a speech. Just to speak, just to show up and speak. Quote-unquote Joe was getting millions of dollars in here just to make introductions to the Chinese. Introductions. Millions of dollars. All verified. Text message proof. It also verifies he was the big guy. In text messages it says, hey, don't let anybody know that Joe knows. And then it says in one text message, they're already paranoid. You wouldn't be paranoid if you weren't guilty, or if you weren't doing something wrong, or doing something you weren't supposed to be doing. So now go back to Obama. So see, you got to branch off for a moment, like President Trump calls the weave. You got to branch off. Now let's branch back over here. Well, Obama. 2010. Uranium 1. You'd have that. And then you also have the 2011. So who's Secretary of State? HRC, Hillary Rodham Clinton. She's still there. 2009 to 2013. So then you have at the 2011, you already know about Osama bin Laden and Obama on May the 2nd, 2011. You had Gaddafi, who was the leader of Libya from 1969 to 2011 when he was assassinated in October, which was 5 months after May. The leader of Libya is being assassinated? And he had just spoken that year. He had just spoken at the UN Assembly, and he stood in front of all those leaders, and he specifically said 2 or 3 big things, but 2 big things. He said, one, he said, the same 5 world powers cannot rule the world. He was talking about the swamp, though. You got to go back to the date of it. The same 5 world powers cannot rule the world. Then he turned and said another key bone-chilling thing, now that you know what happened to him. He said, are we not going to investigate the hanging of Saddam Hussein? He was friends with the United States until they what? Hung him. Till they killed him. See, you got to go back and know your history. In 1991, an Air Force general recommended to the Secretary of Defense then, he said, hey, we got Saddam in our sights. Why don't we take him out now? The next day, they fired that general, made him retire. That was 1991. Saddam was taken out in 2006. So if Saddam was a dictator like they painted everybody him to be, then why did they let him live from 1991 to 2006? That's 15 years. Well, what happened in between then? Little thing called what? 9/11. The day before 9/11, on September the 10th, 2001, the Secretary of Defense gets up and says what? Says that $2.3 trillion was missing from the Pentagon. And the next day, they didn't waste any time because they knew people didn't pay attention. Most Americans don't care about laws, don't care about orders, you don't care about military anything. They didn't have to wait a month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, a year. The next day, after telling you $2.3 trillion was missing from the Pentagon, boom! And then they stamped it on terrorists. All right, then they made an excuse to go after quote-unquote Saddam. And what did President Trump just allude to just a couple months ago that I've shown you that he said in speech? It's a quote he made. I've posted these videos for people to see. What did he say? He specifically said, why didn't we take the oil? Ooh. Americans thought that we were taking the oil. We, the United States of America, we. Why didn't we take the oil? Well, what's the polar opposite of we? Well, if there were a military involved and the United States government involved with the president involved, that would have to be a what? A they. So he's saying that we, the United States of America, didn't take the oil, but you know that the Bushes took the oil, so it was who? The Bushes who took the oil. It wasn't for you, me, we the people. It was for them, the swamp. President Trump's alluded to that. He's already told you that. That's another proclamation of what's coming. So the only way that this could be exonerated, President Trump and this operation, is they got to tell on themselves. You also, if you didn't see it, but there was an article put up yesterday, mainstream media, that if it says specifically that if Joe Biden is talked about his cognitive health by Kamala Harris, then Biden's group is going to do what? Expose all of Kamala's stuff. So what are they doing? Telling on themselves. All right. Now, I know they're not real. Most patriots know they're not real, especially if you get and comprehend special operations, etc. But if you don't, and you're not there at that capacity yet, it's not hogwash just simply because you don't know about it. But at your capacity, if you're still in a normal setting, then okay, they still got to tell on themselves. It's not lifetime, but they're going to tell on themselves. Hunter's the first domino. He's already confirmed everything. He's already confirmed all the content in his book, which is everything. Trafficking, Chinese funding, which is Executive Order 13959. Why would Joe, there's another one, why would quote-unquote Joe continue Executive Order 13959 with a national emergency that is freezing the assets of all people and organizations, institutions of those funding the Chinese Communist military? This book proves that Joe Biden was in like Flynn with all the Chinese, making millions by making introductions. So why would he continue an executive order with a national emergency by President Trump? That's going to damn him because he ain't real. He wasn't real. It's an operation. So now let's go back to Obama. Osama bin Laden was taken out May 2nd. Gaddafi taken out 5 months later in October. No coincidence. No coincidence that the War Powers Act, there's nothing in there for Obama. No coincidence that the War Powers Resolution on Wikipedia says federal and military lawyers say that was a violation of law. No coincidence that it's in Supreme Court docket 23-939 by President Donald John Trump. Donald J. Trump versus United States government, March 19, 2024. See what happens when you don't know law? See what happens when you don't respect the military? See what happens when you don't respect veterans who do know the laws and orders, do know our oath, keeping our oath, not doing anything, not misleading people, don't have millions of sponsors and butt cream and face cream and that cream and this cream and fund me here and fund me there and fund me that. What happens? What happens? See, that's what happens. Cream always rises to the top. The truth always prevails. When you're being good on the front, you'll be good in the middle and good over here. When you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, like the Merle Haggard song says, when folks start doing what they ought to be doing, then they won't be booing no more. See all these people yelling, whining, complaining, griping, fussing, fighting, arguing, carrying on. Look how stupid you look. Because you don't know laws and orders of what you're supposed to know. And then you get mad at me for using the terms like stupid, dumb, ignorant, and all those terms. Well, stupid games get stupid prizes. If you want to swing a big bat, you probably need to have a big bat. All right? So get your ass off the porch. Remember the old saying, if you want to run with the big dogs, get your ass off the porch. All right? Well, that's what happened. If you have something to say, go out there and get you a platform and see if it'll resonate with people. All right? What I show are all the laws, the orders, everything, chronological order, how they all tie in. If you don't have the initiative, that's on you, boo-boo. It ain't on me. I can't make you read. I can't make you study. I can't make you comprehend. If I could, guess what would happen? Your ass would be passing class. That's what you'd be doing. You'd have an A+. You'd have a 99.99999, and it would carry over to a 100. You wouldn't have no A. You wouldn't have no A-. Your butt would have an A+ if I could make you do it. And if I could take a USB cord and plug it into you, I still wouldn't give you all of it because you need to do what? You need to appreciate it. You need to study, read, comprehend, because maintaining and sustaining on the flip side is more important than the justice. The justice is coming. All that's going to be there. That's what makes President Donald John Trump separate. That's what makes him an outsider and separate. That's what makes him so unique. So if you're jumping ship, it's because you are not what you say you are. You're not what you think you are. And you don't need to be there because this is a military operation. And guys like me are doing this because I'm keeping an oath because I'm supposed to, and then two, because I want to, but also it's also honoring my father who's still living, who's a military veteran, but my uncle who's passed, my great uncles who have passed, my one great uncle who's still living, who's veteran, but then also all of my great uncles who passed, my great-grandfather, my grandfather, first off, then my great-grandfather, my great-grandfather was Army Air Corps, World War I. He died at a young age, in his 30s. All right, I'm honoring what one of my NCOs told me. He said, hey, you got a mouth, you got a name, you got a platform, baby. Honor and pay forward all of our fallen, especially friends and family that we've known through the years who have fallen. I have a relative who was 19 years old who got killed in Vietnam. All right. So if you don't have that, if you can't feel that, then you won't ever understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. But if you're a civilian and you're trying to debate me, you're trying to say all these things, you're trying to fight and argue and fuss, that's not even the mission. That's not the mission. This is not debating. It's not about fighting. This is about fighting for our nation, fighting for your brother and your sister, your family member next to you. This is what this is about. The end goal is not going to be my team won and you lost. That's not what this is about. But see, because you've never been in the military, you wouldn't understand camaraderie. You wouldn't understand what it's like to be a Southern boy who grew up in the South, in the rural part of the South, in a 5,000-acre ranch. You wouldn't know what it's like to grow up around and then realize, you know what? This is about a bigger thing. When you get around black people, Hispanic people, who are here for the right reasons, who love our ideology, who buy into our ideology, know our foundation, know our history, they fight for it, we fight for it, we fight for it. There's no color. In the military, we're all green. We all are green, especially the Army. Whatever branch you are, you're that color. But we all have what? You cut our arm open, guess what the color of blood is? Same color. All right, so if you don't understand that, you can't comprehend that, then you won't have the fight that you need, and you're going to just mislead people. So when you mislead people, that's when the bull comes out. That's when the bull gets in the China cabinet and says, hey, you're misleading people. You don't have to mislead people. The laws and the orders already outline what President Donald John Trump is doing, what he's using, who he is, what he is, why he was put here, why he's an outsider, why he wasn't a politician. And that's why you look atrocious when you jump ship with him, whether you're an influencer or a person. You look atrocious because you don't have to look atrocious. And guys like me have the attitude here because I'm saying you don't have to look atrocious. If you'll just study what you need to know as an American civilian, especially if you're a civilian, But also, if you're a veteran, then you really have no excuses whatsoever to not know what's in what you swore in under, especially if you're active duty and reserve. You're Title 10. If you're National Guard, you're Title 32, but you're still under a what? A presidential call-up, which is Title 10. And the oath still reads the same. You're still swearing to the oath of the Constitution. It tells you what? What does the oath say? It says, I do solemnly swear to support and defend the what? The Constitution against what? All enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will do what? Bear true faith and allegiance to the same. And I will do what? Obey the what? The orders of who? The President. And what? Office appointed over me according to what? According to regulations and the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So everything in our oath is what I outline in laws and orders that show what President Donald John Trump is working with. And it's all unique. It's a special operation, strategic operation, government in exile, puppet government, unconventional warfare, irregular warfare. So if you don't know any of those altogether, you're just misleading people. And you're hurting people. You're doing more harm than you're doing helping them. That's exactly what the oath reads. And the words foreign and domestic, guess what, veterans? Some veterans know this, some don't. But guess what, civilians? Foreign and domestic don't mean what you think it means and what you thought it meant. Foreign and domestic was added in 1862 during the Civil War, that Abraham Lincoln added these in there for an extra. It's called the ironclad test oath. It was an extra, meaning, all right, if you already know your foundation, but here's an extra oath. We're going to add this in here. If you looked like some of you influencers look out there, if you look like you're an enemy to the people who know what? Our foundation and our history, which is our ideology, which is the whole reason why we're unique with our republic, on which she stands, the republic in Article 4, Section 4 of the United States Constitution, the republic of which our founding father, James Madison, the father of the Constitution, who wrote the Constitution, who drafted the Constitution, who wrote the Bill of Rights, in Federalist Papers number 10 and number 14, where he says democracies are dangerous, then you'll see what enemies look like. That's why all liberals look like enemies. Then they could still be a good person deep down, but they look like enemies because they say democracy all the time. When President Trump uses democracy, he's saying it meaning like we're destroying that democracy. We're destroying that. That is a verbiage of saying, if you knew the laws and orders in place, we ain't doing anything about democracy. It's a republic. We're getting back to a republic. We're resetting everything on a republic. The 2017 to 2021, resetting of the legislative branch. 2021 to 2025, the resetting of the executive branch. And right now, the resetting of the judicial. It's a resetting. The long train of abuses and usurpations, which is in the Declaration of Independence. It says to do what? Offthrow such government that goes against what? Our foundation. You know what offthrow means? To get rid of. That's what we're doing. That's what draining the swamp means. So nothing's up for debate. Nothing. You got to know the laws and the orders in place. You can't compete where you don't compare. You got to know those things. The founders made it clear. So foreign and domestic meant if you look like anybody who's an enemy to what we're doing with our republic, the laws and the orders and the foundation of that, you're an enemy. So some of you influencers out there, guess what you look like? An enemy. You look like it. It doesn't mean that you are your heart-wise, but if you don't know what's currently invoked in law, you're doing an injustice to yourself, you're doing an injustice to your family, you're doing an injustice to your friends, but you're definitely doing an injustice to the people that you claim are your followers, because you don't even know what the commander-in-chief is working with in the most biblical, monumental, historical operation known to man. And you're doing an injustice to all of us veterans who know what's going on, but you're definitely doing injustice to all of the memorial graves across this land who fought and died under the same Title 10 and the same Title 32 for you to look atrocious. So if you're turning on President Trump at this point, you have come to a block. You've come to a wall to where your IQ, your intellect, or whatever you think you have or what you thought you have, you ain't got it. And again, all of these people who put this together especially the generals, the leaders, the world leaders. It's bipartisan. But President Donald John Trump put his name, face, brand, image, but also his family, his kids, his grandkids, his great-grandchildren, when they get here, his great-great. He put his whole everything up for you to look like freaking idiots out there. All of you people who have jumped ship with him, all of you people who are trashing him, all of you people, ye of little faith, that's exactly what you are if you jump ship with this man, especially where we are right now. If you jump ship with him right now, you don't know what's in current laws and orders that outline the most biblical, monumental, historical operation known to man. And this man put his name and face and brand and everything on that for you. And this ain't a time for you to be questioning your president, because you can't question someone when you don't even know what's going on. You look atrocious. But it's more importantly because of the veterans. All the veterans living and all those who've taken a fall. It's the highest level of disrespect I've seen. It's unprecedented where we are in history that so many people have this much disrespect for veterans. Especially when you're a civilian, especially when you claim to be an influencer. You have no idea what's going on. And if you're against President Trump, and it looks that way, when you're questioning a veteran or President Trump, but especially a veteran showing you the laws and orders, if you're questioning that, you try to lie, steal, use propaganda, use drama, and all this other stuff, you just might be the swamp, because you dang sure are replicating it. And there's nothing up for debate. Not a thing up for debate. Not at this point. Where we are at this point, there should be way more Americans who are appreciative via the laws and the orders and vote, appreciative of President Donald John Trump, appreciative of the military, appreciative of all your military operations on all layers, appreciative of the world leaders and the leaders where the laws and orders most certainly outline that this is an operation. You cannot argue with that until you can compete. It's all here. All laws and orders by President Trump, all your visuals, everything. It's all there. The man, he showed you, he tells you, he proclamates it, but again, until you know the glossary, the definitions, the terms, until you apply those, put them in a chronological order, until you do all that, you're just going to miss out on everything up to this day.